Carissa C., and my title is an electrical instrumentation tech. Here at the Mandarin Wastewater Treatment Facility, we take in the water used at people's houses. So when you wash your hands or flush the toilet, that water comes here to be treated. What I do here is any equipment that is involved in that whole process, we maintain. It is predominantly male. To me, I don't know why, because anyone that's willing to learn can do this job. I would definitely encourage women to get into this industry. I know it can be intimidating at first, but once you get into it, everyone is super willing to help you along your learning journey.
And my name is Eugenia Nyberger, and I'm a process chemistry technician at Northside Generating Station. So I'm in charge of the water that goes into the boiler, which is the water that we boil to turn to steam. Usually, this is a guy's job, but I like working here because I get to use all the knowledge that I got while I was in college. I get to do a lot of chemistry. Like boiling the water, we have to make sure it's at the right pH or it has the right chemicals or whatever for it to work. I love what I do because I get to use what I learned. A lot of people are scared to work in this environment because it's mostly men, but really, I have not encountered anything that I can't do that a man can't do. I can turn the valve just as well as everybody else can. I can check the chemistry just as well as everybody else can. I don't understand why it scares women coming to here and try to do this job.
I'm Regina Owens. I'm a storekeeper at Northside Generating Station for going on 23 years. We had a vendor to come in, and he had a pallet on his truck. He was looking at me kind of intensely. Once I got the pallet out of the van, he was like, "This is not your first time doing this." I said, "No, I've been doing this a while." And I kind of laughed inside because I was wondering if this was one of the guys, would he have asked them that question? I love this type of work. I grew up playing with my brothers and fixing on things when I broke it. I like being out here with my steel-toe boots on, hard hat. I love it. These guys I work with here in the storeroom are like my family. I feel good working around them. I can pull my own weight. I can do things better than the guys can. Sorry, guys.
Both, and it is impressive to be here, and it's impressive that your team, Jay, put this thing and got it in a position that we are moved. So thank everybody that was involved. Want to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, motion passed. A safety briefing by Brandon Edwards.
Thank you, Chair Stein and members of the board. My name is Brandon Edwards, and I'm the Director of Security and Emergency Preparedness. I have the privilege of being part of JEA for over 16 years, and my team is responsible for the protection and emergency planning for all JEA personnel and assets. So let's take a quick minute to go over a safety briefing. For those of us participating downtown, in the event of an emergency, our security department will contact 911 and coordinate any required evacuation. If the emergency requires an evacuation, safely exit through one of the two marked exits in this meeting area. You can exit the north side of the building on Monroe Street, or you can exit the west side of the building via the main entrance on the Pearl. You will assemble in front of the Duval County Courthouse, located at the northeast corner of Adams and Clay. If anyone needs medical assistance or help with safely evacuating, please notify a nearby JEA security officer. Always be cognizant of the potential for trip hazards in and around your respective areas. Lastly, please remember to keep your cell phones on silent and laptops on mute. We're not actively speaking during today's board meeting. Thank you.
Brian. Thank you, Chair Stein. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Pippin. I'm the Director of the Customer Experience Insights and Solutions team under our Chief Customer Officer, Sheila Presley. We manage a portfolio of solutions for our residential and commercial customers. This includes incentives to purchase efficient technologies and billing and payment options to make JEA easier to do business with. At JEA, our values are safety, respect, and integrity. And for today's values moment, I want to highlight our value of integrity. As Spencer Johnson, the author of Who Moved My Cheese, puts it, telling ourselves the truth sometimes is the next hardest thing to telling ourselves about our weaknesses and shortcomings. We are excited about the possibilities of this new idea, what it can mean to our customers, to our business. So the journey to make it a reality begins, but when do we give up on that new idea? After reflecting on my past 18 years at JEA as an idea implementer and from reading countless leadership articles and books, I'll put together for you now my top 5 reasons why the project never ends. Do you have a proximity issue? You're too close to it. You've lost your objectivity. You're committed to seeing it done no matter what. Give it some room so you can think more clearly. Let someone else lead for a time, perhaps. Do you have a timing issue? The idea is perfect, but this isn't the time. Resourcing is tight. Higher priority items need to be accomplished. It's still too new. Socialize the idea before you present it again. Do you have an image issue? Where do you define your self-worth? Is your value as an employee irreparably tied up in the successful completion of the project? Your work reflects you, your qualities, your passions, but it shouldn't define your internal self-worth. Your value to the organization is way more than your contribution to a single project. Do you have an inertia issue? Reward project impact, not project completion. What can be started can be stopped. Constantly evaluate the reason for doing the work. If the reason for the project's existence dies, then it stands to reason the project dies. Do you have a FOMO issue? It isn't fear of missing out, it's fear of missed opportunities. Not every opportunity can be pursued. Resources will always be limited. Let the mission and values drive the work. It is your compass. Don't get lost in the scenery of opportunities. Success strategist Lisa Lieberman-Wang says that telling the truth to yourself is a huge boost to your self-esteem. If you can handle it, you can handle anything. Thank you for your time this morning and have a great board meeting.
Thank you so much. Michael Boylan. I don't think he's here yet. We have a few comments from the public. Start with Dr. Lucy Sonnenberg. Morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time. Esteemed board and very respected JEA staff. I am Dr. Lucy Sonnenberg. I am an environmental scientist, retired research professor from Jacksonville University, a former member and chair of the Jacksonville Environmental Protection Board, and a longtime contributor and analyst for the State of the St. Johns River Report. So you can guess where my interests lie. Most recently, though, my activity has been to serve as a member of the JEA Electric IRP Stakeholders Committee, a position that I'm very honored and pleased to serve in. And I beg your pardon. I've spoken to you as a member of that committee in the past through intermediaries, including my plea to you for JEA to set concrete, measurable carbon reduction goals for your 2050 through your IRP plan. And that really is the theme of the rest of my comments today. I have to say that it was with great excitement, at least on my part, and I'm sure your part, to get revealed the remodeling results that we saw last month at the last stakeholders committee meeting. Sorry, I don't know why I'm so nervous. I've been serving you guys for the last year. I feel like you're my best friends. But it was very exciting, and to see the big reveal of this modeling, the incredible effort of the JEA staff and also the contractors. And as you know, what the model was intending to do was to show you the path forward, the most economic way to reliably produce energy for our community out through 2050. And the model was looked at what I call very simplistically, apologies to the technical people, 11 different possible futures, 6 scenarios, I think 5 sensitivities. So what the outcome was, in my interpretation, was the most clear thing was that by 2030, the most economic thing for JEA to do was to have a 24% renewables mix to serve our community. That was the most clear outcome. That's pretty amazing. I was surprised at lends credence to the idea that solar power is indeed getting less expensive relative to fossil fuels. And with JEA's stretch goals of trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions even further through energy and, efficiency and distributed energy resources, that's really laudable. And maybe it's enough for 2030. That's a huge increase in renewables compared to today. But I ask you, what happens after 2030? No model is going to be able to tell you what you should do after 2030. It's after 2030 that it's your vision, it's your priorities, it's your values, and your attempts to make this community a livable area for which, thank you so much, a livable area for all of us, for us, our children, and our grandchildren in 2050. So that is my plea to you. Perhaps as you look at through 2030, that combined cycle natural gas plant, maybe you need to think about the fact that in 2050, if that plant is run at full capacity out to 2050, JEA's fuel mix will still be a third fossil fuels. Please be aware of the nuances of what you do in the next couple of months in developing this plan. Look out to 2050 and please make this a community our children and our grandchildren can be say that they did the right thing in 2023. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate the water.
Jody, thank you, and Doctor, thank you for your comments. With this, I'm going to step back and let Michael with his comments, then we'll get back to the public comment.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. I apologize for my tardiness. I just want to make a quick comment to the fact that there is a resolution going through the council speaking to the concerns about the 2 bills being raised in Tallahassee and the opposition that we as council members have in positioning those. I know progress is being made in terms of making them acceptable to some degree, but still the concern and the voice of the council, I think, is important for us to, as a body, to communicate that concern to Tallahassee. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Michael. And at the appropriate time, I'd like for Jay to walk through the issues we're dealing with in Tallahassee and where we think they are. And we'd love to collaborate with you guys in any way we can. Next up, Michael, thank you. And next up is Logan Claus.
Hello, my name is Logan Cross. I'm a citizen, a ratepayer, and a member of the Sierra Club Northeast Florida. As you know, JEA is in the midst of developing its integrated resource plan, and you'll soon be presented with that plan. And we appreciate throughout that process CEO Jay Stowe accepting engagement and getting engagement from the community. That's very much appreciated. I want to address a very important part of that integrated resource plan. How should JEA's future power supply be sourced, and what will it cost us, the ratepayers? Something we're all concerned about. Today, I'll introduce a spreadsheet that was given to you all. I hope you have a copy with you, but you don't have to look at it now, but you can look at it later. That includes some analyses and some recommendations. With the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act last year, JEA's lowest cost option is to build, own, and operate at least 1,000 megawatts of new solar. JEA should table its consideration of a new natural gas plant because it costs so much more per megawatt hour than a comparable solar plant. A conservative analysis shows JEA customers will save as much as $9 million every year with 1,000 megawatts of new solar rather than new natural gas. Analysis, which has been given to you, shows the calculations and the data sources used for the computations. If JEA owned and operated solar supply that JEA is currently or will be buying from Florida Power and Light, the cost to JEA customers would decrease from 45 megawatts per hour paid to Florida Power and Light to 32 megawatts per hour, and saving JEA customers over $5 million annually. And that's with its owning its own solar. So why? Because today new solar is and operated by JEA is the cheapest South power supply because of the Inflation Reduction Act's massive credits, but also the low borrowing rate that JEA could have. So in closing, I will say the financial analysis included in the handout were created with the assistance of energy consultants with expertise and experience in energy analysis and pricing. The analysis utilized third-party data from reputable sources that are readily available to all of you. The analysis can be easily replicated by JEA personnel to check the accuracy of the computations, and we certainly encourage you to do so. The analyses also reflect a conscious effort to use enhanced values for the combined cycle natural gas part of that computation to make sure that any source of bias might be removed. I encourage you to, when time permits, take a hard look at that spreadsheet and take it into consideration when you start making decisions about something as big as building a new combined cycle natural gas plant. Again, in closing, thank you very much to CEO Stowe for his willingness to engage with the public. Thank you.
William, thank you. And we've got quite a bit of public comments today, so let's try to work on 3 minutes if any way possible. But Logan, I appreciate the spreadsheet and I appreciate your comments. Paul Brimmer.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Bremer. My residence is at 765 Margaret Street in Riverside, near Five Points. My office is at 742 Delwood Avenue in Riverside, in the same building. In 2006, my wife and I remodeled an old commercial building into our home and office combined. Because it was a commercial building, it had a flat roof. We thought, what a great idea. We can put solar panels on our flat roof. So in 2009, we did that. The cost for 5,000 watts of solar power at that time, was $45,000. Luckily, the state of Florida had a plan in place at that time where they paid $20,000 of that $45,000 cost. Needless to say, that system, which has operated reliably and has reduced our monthly bill considerably, has not yet paid for itself at $25,000. It will within the next 3 years by my calculation. In 2013, we decided to put another solar system in our office because it's on a separate meter. A similar size system in 2013 cost us $11,000. It has already paid for itself easily. That $11,000 system, were we to install it today, would cost us less than $5,000. Now, from $45,000 to $5,000 says something about the solar industry and its cost. Solar power has declined in just such orders of magnitude in cost that it's mind-boggling to think how it's done that in such a short period of time. For example, with flat-roofed ex-commercial building, think about how many flat-roofed commercial buildings there are in Jacksonville. There are thousands of them. Most of them have rented tenants. So the owners of the buildings and the tenants of the buildings have no incentive to install solar at all. But the owner of those buildings would have incentive to install solar if JEA had a system in place to pick up the power they were generating from their roofs. At no capital cost to JEA, you could have thousands of small solar power suppliers to your system. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Valerie?
Good morning, good morning. Sure. Today is another exciting day for JEA's 125 plus year history with the move to a new building. And speaking of history, IBW 2358 will be celebrating 50 years in April as we received our charter back in 1973. So we're excited. So as JEA has grown over the years, so has IBW. I am proud to stand before you as a representative of more than 500 of those JEA employees. I got the opportunity to meet some of the new employees yesterday during the new employee orientation expo, who are just getting started to making their own history. So as most history, we look back on accomplishments we've achieved as an organization, like receiving your charter, negotiating your first contract, elections of new officers, and the election for the first female business manager. We also learned from the adversities, like those of closing the defined pension plan and the potential sale of JEA. But we realized that we are all in this together. I want to thank the current leadership for believing in the importance of keeping JEA locally owned. And I know it has not always been easy, but I want you to know that IBEW and the other unions who are here, JSA, PEA, ASPE, Langana 630, are always ready to stand behind you to keep JEA as always and keep moving JEA forward. So here's looking forward to another 50 years of IBEW's partnership with JEA. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Valerie, thank you, and thank you for your partnership and your partners here partnership. And we are so sorry about the passing of your father also.
Thank you.
Prayers are with you. Linda? Remember?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I thank my husband for making some comments about our solar unit. When we bought the house and started putting solar on it, the previous building had been what is kindly called a show bar. And of course, in the neighborhood, there was a lot of interest in what we were going to do with it. And as we started putting solar on the building, the neighbors really started paying attention. And we got many calls. In fact, I was talking to them all the time about solar. And their interest in solar was huge. They wanted to know how to do it, where to pay for it, how they could do that kind of thing. Since then, solar has become like a byword in the community. We urge you to think hard about the continued dollar investment in fossil fuel sources. We find that importing natural gas is just as much of a risk as anything else coming in from the Gulf Coast of Mexico during a potential destructive storm, and the rising costs of the fossil fuels. Right now, you in JEA have the opportunity to expand the use of clean, renewable energy, and at the same time, create community resilience to peak power demands through the community microgrids and also community battery storages. Many community members cannot afford to install power. There are communities of low income where it's going to rely on the businesses in those communities to put the power. But they can really benefit from the storage of solar power in their community and the way that they can be fed to them during the outages that will occur, and they will occur. We feel that the whole Jacksonville community will benefit during a storm and during other times of peak need for solar power. And we urge you to consider that and to consider the cost of it to your ratepayers. Thank you very much.
Linda, thank you so much. Bud?
Good morning, I'm Bud Guerra. I think you're hearing from everybody who's been involved in the stakeholder group that we're pleased with JEA staff. They've listened to us. They haven't always done exactly what we wanted them to, but they listened and they paid attention. But now, and they do the numbers. However, the staff is somewhat limited to go beyond the numbers. And that's why we have a board. We don't just run this through a model. The staff needs to hear from the board as to what you think is important. I think a good example is the Brimmer's talked about rooftop solar. There's really nothing in the plan much about rooftop solar. That's something that is less an economic decision for JEA as a policy decision. So where JEA changed its rates a few years ago so that there's no question that we're not subsidizing rooftop solar anymore, we could make it a lot easier and we could encourage people to put in rooftop solar. And I'd like to see JEA have a policy to encourage rooftop solar. And then, of course, I'm concerned if we continue to build natural gas. We're about 75% natural gas now, and the plan, even with adding lots of solar, would still keep JEA at about 75% of its energy would come from natural gas. That's a big risk. We've noticed just in the last couple of years what the prices of natural gas can do. And we know there's also the possibility of interruptions to supply. But mainly what I'd like to encourage the board to do is speak up today and speak up at your committee meetings next month so that the staff can hear something beyond what's coming from the models. Thank you for your work.
Bud, thank you so much. Sarah Harper?
Hello. Well, I wanted to first start off by thanking you for having us here today. It's nice to be able to comment on the future of our city's energy and its resources and how they're being spent. So I'm here today as a science nerd. I really enjoy learning about science, and ever since I was 12 years old and went on a trip to Portola Springs, where I couldn't go on a glass bottom boat tour because there was too much algae in the spring, I've been interested in the science that influences the world around us. And so I know climate change is a dirty word. Solar energy can be a dirty word. So I just wanted to talk about kind of the systems that influence a lot of these comments that are here today. So when you think about the atmosphere, what we breathe, what we're sitting in, is the troposphere. It's the part of the atmosphere that has the most oxygen, the most gases, and also is how we see the weather that is produced. Now, this troposphere is what is absorbing the chemicals that are burned when we produce energy. You are in the energy producing business. So how does energy get into this troposphere besides the energy that the humans produce? Well, it gets in through the number one way how energy is produced, heat. So that's the sun. The sun is the major way that energy gets into the atmosphere, and these chemicals that humans are releasing help the atmosphere to trap more energy that is coming in from the sun, which is increasing the heat and the energy that is in the atmosphere that is driving natural processes, that is driving precipitation, that is driving these atmospheric rivers that we hear about in California, or the tornadoes that we hear about that just happened in the southeast. So this energy drives these natural systems, and we're influencing it by the chemicals that we're putting on. And I think that one chemical that has not been talked about that is really important, and that is really being talked about in international discourse right now, is methane. Over 150 countries this year have agreed to an international framework on a convention of how to deal with methane, which means that they will come together and they will debate, just like they did in 1985, on CFCs, ozone-depleting substances. Now, that was a really quick and easy. It's one of the most successful international regulations, international agreements known to humanity. And why? It's because it affected all of us. And we all knew that we had to take action on this really important chemical. And I believe that methane is the new CFCs. It's something that's very easily driving warming and in a very short time span. Methane lives in the atmosphere for 20 years and has I believe 70 times more warming potential than carbon in those 20 years. So it's just something that I think, is a crucial part of thinking about business plans going forward as you open yourself up to regulatory risk, which opens yourself up to investment risk. If you have an investment that's supposed to last for 40 years, if there's a global agreement on methane in the next 10 years, which I'm pretty sure that there will be, and many academics are very sure that there will be, based on past historical similar frameworks around similar chemicals, I think you're opening yourself up to regulatory risk of a very important asset to the city and something that will help drive our communities and help drive our businesses. So that's just my comments. Sorry for getting out my science nerdiness, but I hope that you take my comment as is.
Sarah, thank you so much. Adam Rosenblatt.
Morning. My name is Dr. Adam Rosenblatt. I'm a biology professor at the University of North Florida and also the leader of the local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, which advocates for common sense climate solutions at the local and national levels. And City Council Member Boylan is my representative on the City Council. Nice to see you again. I'm here today to strongly urge the JEA board to set aggressive goals for transitioning JEA away from fossil fuel energy sources like fossil gas and toward renewable energy sources like solar and wind. There are many economic and national security and climate change arguments in favor of such a transition, some of which you've already heard this morning. But today I'd like to highlight the public health argument for you, which I'm not sure you've heard a lot about. First, burning fossil gas leads to large amounts of air pollution. According to a recent study from the School of Public Health at Harvard, burning fossil gas for electricity generation specifically leads to a minimum of 100 deaths per year in Florida and a minimum of $1 billion in overall health impacts to the Florida population. Second, burning fossil gas emits large amounts of greenhouse gases, which contribute to the climate crisis and global warming. As global warming continues, extreme heat events, which kill more people than any other weather-related event, will become more common here in Florida. Already, almost 7,000 people go to the emergency room each year in Florida because of heat-related health issues. And the health impacts of extreme heat are sure to increase in Jacksonville because extreme heat days in Jacksonville are expected to rise from around 3 per year to almost 50 per year over the next several decades. JEA itself and the building we are in right now will be particularly hard hit by extreme heat. I led a heat mapping study of Jacksonville in the summer of 2022 in collaboration with the city of Jacksonville. And we found that while other parts of the city only reach a heat index value of 95 degrees Fahrenheit on certain days, the downtown area we're in right now, along with many other neighborhoods on the north side, reached a heat index value of more than 116 degrees Fahrenheit on those same days. This amount of heat is a public health disaster waiting to happen, and JEA will be a major local cause of this disaster if it does not quickly transition to an energy mix that relies more heavily on renewable energy sources. JEA board has an opportunity to set JEA and the city of Jacksonville on a healthier path, and I strongly urge you to seize it. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to share more details about anything I've mentioned with the board if you'd like.
Adam, thank you for your time. John Bird.
Yeah, good morning. I had to chuckle over the first speaker. My wife and I also bought our house in 2007, and we looked into putting solar panels on our roof, and we were also quoted that $50,000 figure. Sorry about that. We were quoted that $50,000 figure. We played it to New York. So thank you for taking that plunge at the time. I didn't quite have some courage to do it. My statement is this: as you consider JEA options for its future ways to generate electricity in Northeast Florida, you are likely thinking about the utility's past decisions as you weigh its future course. Specifically, JEA's 2008 decision to invest in the expansion of nuclear power plant Vogtle, as seemingly sound as it was at the time, has in fact I'm a serious liability, a contract that JEA has fought to jettison. The failure of Plant Vogtle, I would imagine, limits the latitude JEA feels comfortable with to invest in renewable energy. In short, I would guess that you, as board members, now feel a strong responsibility to lean on the tried and true technology with the least risk of failure. That is, turning heavily to burning natural gas. Your industry is being disrupted in fundamental ways. Concerns over the impacts of burning fossil fuels are mounting, while the costs of those fuels are fluctuating up and down. Solar power, while the best solution in terms of cost, reliability, and protection of the climate, looks risky to depend on at a time when there is no room for failure. At the same time, the demand on you to produce reliable electric energy has never been greater, and the promises to increase as we head down the path of intensive electrification of transportation, on our homes and workplaces in this accelerating digital age. Given this challenging backdrop, I am here to make two requests. First, that you agree to revisit your decision on how to generate electricity in a regular fashion, every 2 years, let's say. We live in a time of fast change and rapid technological breakthrough. A once in a decade review of your fundamental business model was sufficient in the past. It is foolhardy moving forward. Second, that you as board members make the effort to stay aware of the growing climate dangers and the role that the burning of coal and natural gas plays in those threats. Science tells us these climate changes, the increased heat, sea level rise, flooding, more intense rainfall, and tropical storms will continue to worsen until we find the will to reduce our emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Florida is particularly vulnerable to all of these threats. Climate change is science, not politics. It is a fundamental challenge of our time. It is an issue on which JEA must engage now and increasingly in the future. Be prepared.
John, thank you. Lisa Reineman.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Reineman, your St. Johns River Keeper, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak, as well as to serve on JEA's Integrated Resource Plan Stakeholder Group. As many have said, it's been a wonderful opportunity to get to know JEA staff better and work through some of these challenging times in front of us. We also appreciate your service and your leadership in charting a more resilient course for Jacksonville's future. We now ask that you take the same leadership role in aggressive, responsible steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce the impact of sea level rise in a warming planet, to protect our community and protect our economy for today as well as future generations. As temperatures rise, we're seeing more frequent storms, we're seeing larger storms, and we're seeing wetter storms, as evidenced by back-to-back hurricanes Ian and Nicole in 2022. Last fall, we were in Northeast Florida, were largely spared from the devastating blow, but many communities along the St. Johns River were not as fortunate. Historic flooding broke records throughout the St. Johns River watershed, inundating homes with water, muck, and raw sewage. Millions of gallons of sewage spilled in our tributaries, contaminating our river with excess nutrients and bacteria, threatening not only the directly impacted areas, but downstream communities as well here in Northeast Florida, and which will most likely trigger toxic blue-green algae outbreaks as temperatures warm this season. Hurricane Ian and Nicole, along with its predecessors, Matthew and Irma, underscore the importance of ensuring that the St. Johns River is resilient and healthy enough to withstand more frequent shocks to its system, but also the importance of addressing the underlying causes of climate change. Fortunately, JEA can act now and must act now to invest in strategies that will address the causes of climate change and making our community and our river more resilient. These strategies will also eliminate ongoing harm and risk to the St. Johns River, our greatest natural asset. The same strategies that you've heard today will lower energy costs for families and businesses, create clean energy jobs, and deliver a healthy future for our grandchildren and our children. There's never been a better time to invest in renewable energy, to create high-paying jobs, to lower monthly electric bills, and to chart a healthier path towards a resilient First Coast. We look forward to this ongoing conversation and look forward to your leadership as we work together for a better future. Thank you so much.
Lisa, thank you, and thanks for all you do for our community. Leanne? Leanne Costales? Nubian Roberts?
Greetings, community. I'm truly excited to be coming in front of you. I am a representative of the North Side and the historical Durbanville community. Our community activist network in those two areas. Oh, I also have a business on the 2500 Myrtle Avenue, which is a thrift store. And we do a lot of community engagement out of our store. What I find is that there aren't a lot of folks in the community that I know that are here today. So I came on behalf of them just to speak to the high costs and high prices that we're seeing and feeling every day. We appreciate all the work that JEA has done in those low-income communities because we do see you out there when we are hurting. We appreciate it. But we ask that you do make decisions that are best for every class of people in Jacksonville. We have some folks that are very much struggling in this economy, and they really just want an opportunity to just be able to have some lights for their kids, just keeping it simple. And then also just being served when there's a hurricane happening. So I've talked to folks and are really excited to be educated and know more about some of the solar energy things, but they're not able to come here because they have to work to feed their families. But they speak about these things to me all the time. We'd love it if there were more community engagements from you all, maybe a survey, and talk to the folks, see how they're feeling about how the bills are rising now. They need you to make the best decisions for every side of Jacksonville. So that's what I'm here to do because I did have the time and opportunity to come speak. And I just wanted to make sure that every single voice in Jacksonville was heard. So thank you so much for letting me have an opportunity. My friend Leanne, I know she stepped out, so maybe you guys can call her back again because she has really important things to say because she's really into climate. So hopefully she'll get another opportunity. But thank you for letting the little people speak. We appreciate it.
Vivian, you're not the little people. Every person is important in this community. Yeah. And thank you so much for your comments. Josh?
Hello. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all today. And a few months I've been coming to these meetings. I've really been encouraged by the board interacting, engaging with the public and public comments. So thank you, and just want to continue to encourage you to speak up and speak out to shape the policy and sort of drive energy democracy for our community. My name is Dr. Joshua Melko. I'm a chemistry professor at the University of North Florida. In previous comments, I've talked about how JEA could really catalyze its shift to renewable energy by using provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, several provisions of which I worked on during my time as energy policy advisor in the United States Senate. Today, I want to address one of the other policies I worked on, a penalty for utilities that was established in the Inflation Reduction Act. This is the Methane Emissions Reduction Program. And this is a law that will establish a maximum annual methane emission rate and impose a penalty of $1,500 per metric ton of methane for years after 2026. So when JEA is proposing a combined cycle gas plant of 571 megawatts, slated to come online after 2026, we must consider the penalties from this methane emissions reduction program and any capital costs needed to address those methane emissions. 1,500 per metric ton, a number that likely is only going to increase in time. The typical combined cycle gas plant has a useful life of 25 to 30 years. So assuming this gets built in, say, 2030, you're locking in those financial penalties, which again will probably increase, just like you're locking in the carbon emissions until 2060. I also think this 30-year lifespan of the combined cycle gas plant is a problem when you think about it in context of net zero pledges, both globally and here at home. We've heard a little bit earlier about some international policies around methane, but just in the United States, the Biden administration has a goal of 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035. So thinking about beginning the operation of this combined cycle gas plant, when there's a distinct possibility that this country is aggressively shifting to carbon-free electricity, seems a bit imprudent. So just think about the difficulties in financing this gas plant if there's not the 30-year cost recovery, but 5 to 10 years. Some can say you can still meet this decarbonization goals with a combined cycle natural gas plant. That would have to be by burning green hydrogen or by using renewable natural gas or paying for carbon dioxide removal somewhere else. But all of these have a long way to go in terms of cost effectiveness and technical maturity. So it's possible they become viable in the future, but then JEA has to factor in those costs and capital costs associated in terms of these removal investments for the new combined cycle plant. So for all these reasons, it's my belief that this combined cycle plant beginning around 2030, assuming a lifetime of 25 to 30 years, will lead to higher cost electricity for our community, in addition to much higher greenhouse gas emissions. As clean energy costs continue to fall, as businesses and consumers are demanding more renewable energy, as the community is demanding energy democracy, as the policy landscape accelerates to decarbonize our energy sector, JEA should not burden the city of Jacksonville with what could be a 30-year fossil fuel albatross around its neck. Thank you.
Josh, thank you for your comments. Mackenzie?
Hi there, everyone. Hello, board. My name is Mackenzie. I'm the Climate Justice Director for Florida Rising. We're a political organization that focuses on building political power and bringing voice to Black and Brown communities across the state of Florida and here in Jacksonville. And yeah, I'm here to speak on behalf of that community. And they aren't able to speak here at this time, because folks are working, as my colleague had said. So I'm going to be able to speak on their behalf as well. And I'm here to talk about high energy bills and how that impacts folks' daily lives. When people don't have consistent access to reliable and affordable power, they're forced to have trade-offs between other expenses such as medication, groceries, childcare, things like that, that impacts their daily life. I've spoken to folks that said their JEA bill is $400, $500. That's insane, and that's coming from, that's money that's coming from these other expenses, like I said. Energy insecurity often feeds into a cascade of disadvantages: financial hardship, eviction, tenant abuse, interruption of work or schooling, and unsafe heat or mold exposure. And also just the stress impact that folks are experiencing as well. And so I really am just saying that y'all need to, truly look at investing into energy efficiency programs, moving away from fossil fuels. We've seen across the state of Florida, not just JEA, FPL, Duke, because of the reliance on fossil fuels, it led to increases, rate hikes in folks' energy bills. And that's the reason why we need to move away from that. The folks, often say the crisis in Ukraine and things like that. Like Jacksonville and Florida as a whole needs to move away from these things so that this is not burdening our customers and Floridians as a whole. But I want to leave you with this that just came out from an energy burden report that was focused on Jacksonville. Jacksonville experiences energy burdens at 13.1% higher than the national average. And even worse, 100% of Black communities are within the top 5% of energy burden. That's 100% of the Black community in Jacksonville. And so, I was going to leave y'all with this. The board, we all have an opportunity to change that by heavily investing in energy efficiency programs and setting goals that lower bills for community members, and be able to move forward and live their lives and spend their money on the things that they need to, and invest in jobs. I just want to leave y'all with that. And again, I hope you all look into more energy efficiency programs and moving away from fossil fuels and investing heavily into renewable energy like solar and wind and such. So, thank you.
Mackenzie, thank you so much for what you're doing in the community and your comments. Christian?
Good morning, board and audience. My name is Christian Gonzalez Obegoso. I serve currently as North Florida Regional Director with Florida Rising. I've heard many of our colleagues speak right now. We're about building inside our Black and brown neighbors across the state of Florida around our goal for justice on every block. Justice on every block looks for our neighbors about being able to breathe clean air when they leave the house. Am I right in saying that? And with that in mind, that's what we're engaging actively with our neighbors in the north side, especially around the north side generating station, when it comes to how do we ensure that their kids themselves can be breathing the clean air in long term here in the city of Jacksonville. Right now, as we fight for crime resiliency and justice in the neighborhood, that's why we are actively engaging these sort of board meetings. As mentioned before, our neighbors cannot join these meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? So I want to share with y'all one of the quotes from one of our neighbors who lives 2 miles away from the Northside Generating Station. I believe their voice will be heard here as well, instead of just the vote right here. Many of them want to pay to be here, right? So I want to show one of the quotes from one of our votes. Who's currently working right now. We know many of our neighbors will be impacted like this are right now. So the quote from Stephen Johnson, one of our community members who lives 2 miles away from the Northside Generating Station, who wished to be here as well, but here's her quote. While statistics show improvement on energy burden as a whole in Duval County and the surrounding areas, in the Black and African American community, the burden is still extremely high. It calls for a change so that all communities can have access to improved energy efficient quality of life. I see families that have to make the decision of choosing what to go without in order to get by, whether going without food or life-saving medication, but we need to ensure people's comfort are not taken away and for granted. JEA and our city leaders need to do more to provide energy efficient programs for lower income earning homeowners and renters. But let's stay focused on breaking the energy burden cycle. Nothing will change. I think this echoes in many ways what our community members have said, that I'm sure they will say if these meetings were in after hours when our community members are actually able to engage. After rising, I want to read the state that our goal is about being able to retire oil and gas plants that contribute to climate change and air pollution in our neighborhoods, and how we are primarily supporting clean and renewable energy to lower bills and decrease pollution that will long-term impact our neighbors, primarily our Black neighbors in the city of Jacksonville. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Christian, thank you for your comments. Dave, Rudy Berry.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dave Bruderly. I'm a retired professional engineer who's lived here and worked here in Florida out of a base in Gainesville and now Jacksonville since 1974. The first third of my career was kind of focused on helping establish technology to get built. Crystal River 4 and 5 was the last coal-fired plant built in Florida. Helped get the permits for that. We helped get the permits for the nuclear submarine base up in Kings Bay. Second third of my career was focused on trying to prevent pollution. In other words, not just clean up the mess that we made by mistakes of the past, but be proactive and kind of embrace the spirit of the Pollution Prevention Act of 1990, which would be to eliminate those things in our economy that cause harm, both internal and external costs. in that spirit, and in the last third of my career has been frankly in politics. I've run for Congress a couple times in 2002 in response to the Iraqi fiasco. I ran for Congress out of Gainesville on the pledge that we've got to eliminate our dependency, not just on foreign oil, but on oil, period. Jeb Bush appointed me to the Plainfield Florida Advisory Board around in that time. And we'll work very hard here with Jeff Sheffield and the TPO to help put forward the initiatives that have been made with electric vehicles, biofuels, even natural gas buses and so forth. And those steps have been tremendous. 30 years ago, I wrote a paper for the Air Pollution Control Association called Hydrogen, the fuel of the future, if we choose to use it. And by using the word hydrogen, I'm also talking about electrochemistry. We're talking about hydrogen as an energy carrier and electricity as an energy carrier. And frankly, if we're going to think globally and act globally to solve the climate problem, we have to have a global solution. And tragically, we don't have that yet in place. We do have goals. We've got some very ambitious goals that have been set, but we don't have a plan in place to achieve those goals other than looking at dozens of individual technologies and business opportunities that could be used to achieve those goals if they can be implemented. So the key here is we have technology, we have the money, we have the knowledge, we have the enthusiasm. I'm very encouraged by the turnout here. I frankly will tell you that after the fiasco with your previous boards, I gave up on this community. I gave up on making this speech, but I'm encouraged by John Burr and his article in the paper Sunday. So I'm here again to tell you that this is an economic development opportunity where you can benefit the entire community if you put a plan in place that has short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. Short-term, you address how do you help your residents not just have lower electric rates, but lower energy costs. And that means zero net energy construction for new construction. We're building stick-built houses all over the state. Very few of them are zero net energy. We knew how to do that 20 years ago. We're still not doing it because we don't have the policy in place. We don't have the plan in place. We need the plan. So I'd be happy to work with your staff to help put some crazy ideas out on the table that will help us achieve the 2050 emission goals that the Biden administration has bought into, that the IPCC is recommending, so we can make our contribution to reducing our carbon footprint. On the medium term, there are things you guys can do with things like rooftop solar and other initiatives to basically reduce the demand for your product. And that's very important. You got to get on the demand side. And then on the long term, you got to look at the supply side. And it's not just eliminating fossil fuels, it's using those. We're never going to eliminate fossil fuels. What I learned in 1990 when Sheikh Yamani, who was the energy minister of Saudi Arabia, he basically said the Stone Age did not end because the world ran out of stones. And the oil age, the fossil fuel age, is not going to end because the world runs out of fossil fuels. They're going to be here, and there's an industry in place that's going to use those as long as they can make money. Your job is to figure out your piece of the puzzle where people can build on the existing infrastructure that we have and transition that infrastructure and transportation and the built environment to be more efficient, much more cleaner, achieve the 2050 goals, and by the way, put money back in this community. And I'll close by saying that I started interacting with JEA and the city. I moved here about 12 years ago, but when I heard that we were going to spend $800 million to deepen the St. Johns River, to accommodate ships built in China and Korea that were being built bigger, because that was their response to an International Maritime Organization rule that said you had to reduce the pollution intensity of cargo moved across the oceans. Our response to that in Florida was to spend $800 million to accommodate Chinese entrepreneurs who were trying to reduce their carbon footprint. We did not spend $800 million to help you guys figure out how to implement a plan to reduce our carbon footprint.
So we got to turn that type of thinking around. I will close also by saying that another member of your maritime community, Crowley, based on the work they've done on the West Coast, got $40-some million to help Jacksport reduce their carbon footprint through electrification. Crowley is also moving beyond electricity. They're looking at hydrogen and other alternatives, as is the entire maritime industry around the world. So things are changing very rapidly. You need a short-term, medium, and long-term strategy to accommodate or to react to and get ahead of, if you can, all of these opportunities. Hydrogen is part of that mix. Green hydrogen is part of that mix. Frankly, it's not going to affect most of the people in this room because electric vehicles and more efficient homes are by far and away the most cost-effective short-term solution. But hydrogen comes in when you're dealing with industry, with heavy industry. How do you make cement? How do you refine? How do you use the fossil fuels we have with oil refinery? Use that hydrogen as an energy carrier to replace methane. You just can't ban natural gas. You got to take your combined cycle plants, make them cleaner. One way to do that, I'll close on this one, third close. You can blend hydrogen into a pipeline and you can transport it long distances, concentration up to 20%. I don't know where all this renewable energy is going to come from in Florida because we don't have a plan in Florida to make all the renewable energy that we need. So maybe we're going to have to import some from places where they have a lot of a wind resource, like Iowa. And that renewable energy could be transported both as electricity and or as hydrogen in existing infrastructure. And that's where you can work with FPNL and your other utilities in the state to come up with a plan for how can Florida benefit from all the things that are happening in not only around the world, but in the United States with the Biden administration and the legislation that they've enacted. There was a hydrogen shock program the DOE funded. A couple $1 billion have been set aside. And to my knowledge, the Southeast United States is not part of that. The programs, they're based in other parts of the country.
Thank you, Dave.
We should be working on all this stuff. And you guys are the driver in this community for energy. Get with the JTA, get with Jacksport, you get with your new mayor and your new city council, and let's make America, or let's make Jacksonville a leader in this industry because we've got nothing to lose.
Dave, thank you so much.
I appreciate the time for the sermon, and I'll get more involved. I've enjoyed my travels around the world, and I basically am. When I was born, we had 2 billion people on this planet. Today we got 8 billion, and if we don't do something, we're not going to hang separately. We're going to hang together.
Dave, thank you so much for your comments. Is Leanne in the audience? Okay, with that,
We have one online.
we have one online. Okay.
Hi, this is Landon. We do have quite a number of folks online. I do have an additional person that's asked to provide public comments. But for those that have joined us and you're not familiar with us and you would like to provide public comments today, there's 2 ways to do that. The very first way is by raising your hand in the participant pane. If you click on the participant pane, you will see a little hand next to your name. If you click on that, it will activate, letting me know that you'd like to speak. The other option, as you can see, is we do have the chat capability. If you hit the chat button and either ask to speak or would like to submit your comment, please do so. With that, Mike, thank you for waiting. You are the first for providing public comments virtually. Mike, you have the floor.
Landon, before Mike, let's make sure we try to stay on the 3-minute time. I know everybody wants important comments, but I think we've got a lot of an agenda to get through. So I appreciate it. We can work towards the 3-minute number. Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Mike Ludwig, a proud member of the Northside Coalition of Jacksonville. Several members of the public, including Mr. Ben Frazier, spoke at your last meeting about how JEA's rate changes would adversely impact customers that use the least amount of electricity and how the changes would benefit higher electricity users. It's truly unfortunate that at that time you did not take a step back to consider other options, particularly given some of the very good discussion that took place among board members regarding the disproportionate impact on low-income users and equity issues. You heard us, but you didn't act to change the proposal to a more incremental change in the base monthly charge. The muted impact on low energy users depicted in the rate change proposal was predicated on the hope that fuel charge rates will decrease back to November 2022 levels. And while I hope that's correct, otherwise, the impact on low energy users will not look at all as what was presented to you by JEA staff. Moreover, it's been reported that JEA turns over $122 million a year to the city. I don't know if you have any control over how much money is turned over to the city, but couldn't those funds have been used to help mitigate the base monthly charges that users are facing? Finally, as was mentioned in the last meeting, JEA also needs to look closely and scrutinize its fixed cost expenditures so that the base monthly charge increases can be mitigated in the future. This examination of JEA's expenses should be among your highest priorities to keep rates down for customers. I appeal to you to be open to the voices of the people and to look out for those least able to pay. And whatever you do, don't sell JEA. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next, Lori, you're next.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I feel like I'm missing the party today. There's so many people there, and I was really looking forward to seeing the new location, but I've got a bit of a cold and didn't think it was fair to bring that in there. Good morning. My name is Lorianne Santa Maria. I'm a resident of Jacksonville, and I'm speaking to you today as a parent as well as a business owner. At last week's board meeting, I spoke about the net zero commitments that several of our city's largest employers have already made and the criticality of having a generation mix which can enable them to meet their publicly stated commitments. So today I've got a bit of an alphanumeric soup to talk about. And when we boil that soup down, we see that clean energy is a key ingredient to the economic development of the entire business community, not just our larger employers. First letters are ESG, as in environmental, social, and governance reporting. And this is a reality today. This is not something futuristic. In Europe, the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, requires that all companies meeting certain criteria report on ESG activities. These criteria are companies over 250 employees, revenue of greater than 40 million euros, and assets of greater than 20 million euros. While Europe is across an ocean, it actually does impact us today, and here's why. The CSRD applies to non-EU based companies that have subsidiaries operating in Europe. So some of our city's top employers that we mentioned last month, such as Deutsche Bank and Johnson & Johnson, will be subject to this reporting, and this goes into effect in the 2024 financial reporting year. The SEC is also on the verge of passing similar reporting requirements, and that's going to make the issue even more urgent for Jacksonville. So I promised you an alphanumeric soup. So here's the numeric part of it. The numbers are 1, 2, 3, as in scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Scope 1 covers emissions that a company produces during its own processes, so fuels that it uses to produce its products, fuel that's used to power its fleet. Scope 2 covers emissions that a company causes indirectly through the energy it purchases and uses, and that's usually where JEA comes in. And to be honest, these large companies we've been talking about, when they operate in an area where the utility does not have a clean energy mix, they can usually actually solve it on their own through either rooftop solar or PPAs. Where things get tricky is scope 3 emissions. And if I've lost you, please come back at this point, because this is the part that's really important for small business owners like myself. With scope 3 emissions, look at a company's entire supply chain, so all of the vendors that they have. And more companies now are looking, these larger companies that have these commitments that they need to make are looking at their scope 3 emissions, or looking at the vendors that they're doing business with and requiring them also to reduce their emission. And going forward, smaller companies that operate under a utility that does not have a clean energy mix will be at a clear disadvantage.
And when we keep in mind that several cities in our state have already made net zero commitments, it doesn't require a far stretch of the imagination to conclude that choosing to operate in Jacksonville will become a competitive disadvantage for small businesses like mine if we don't address this issue. And I ask that you consider the economic impacts of the decisions that you make in the IRP process. Thank you very much.
So with that, I'll hear the revenue EJ. So, I'm saying thank you for the public. It has been a success for us to have our public come in through the IRP working group and what we hear today. This is a discussion than you normally hear, but I think it's important for us to hear what is going on, and I hope that as we get into the presentation of that, that you'll hear some of the things that the we've been asking for will be echoed in what we're working towards. So I think I should probably start with welcome to the first board meeting of the spring and welcome to the first board meeting from the new building. I think several times or some number of times in suggested that the next meeting was going to be here. I'm pretty sure that the next meeting will also be here. I think I can get that right now. This has been a project that's been underway and ongoing for a long time, as early as 2017, for the filmmaking in October of 2020. And there's still some work to be done to get it ready for some of the technology and get conference rooms ready. We will be welcoming customers in the week of April 10th as we get it out of the building, but it's taken a lot of work for a lot of people to get this done. I can't name all of the individuals that have made this happen, but I do want to recognize Nancy Vesey and Matthew Poteet for the work that they did to lead the team. There was a large team to be able to make this happen. This month, we plan on having Nancy and some representatives from Ryan companies to here to kind of walk through with you what some of the process was to get to this point. We'll have a little bit more discussion about it then. This is it's exciting to be here. We are ready to welcome our customers in a different way in our lobby on April 10th. The way that we work, the employees starting last week had started to come in and start to use the building and work where they work best here with some additional and different collaborative space. So next month we'll have a little bit more information about how the building was built. This month is the 25th anniversary of Florida's Water Conservation Month. This is during the last 25 years. Florida has made progress on environmental goals, and JEA has supported that. We want to recognize that as we plan, and later today we'll join with other water management districts. At 10:30 today, we working with the St. Johns River Water Management District to host the North Florida Water Conservation Workshop. Water conservation specialists from all over North Florida meet quarterly to discuss new innovations, share programs, which I think is consistent with some of what you heard today from the public. We have IRP, a lot of discussion about our electric IRP today. We have another IRP that is our water IRP, and water conservation was one of the main focuses of that IRP. Water conservation rebate incentives exist, and we're working with customers, in particular large multifamily areas, to use less water. And so we'll celebrate water conservation today. There's an approval item for a resolution in your it is underneath the consent agenda. Government relations update, Chair Stein. I'm really going to be Chair Baker because that just comes off so naturally. Chair Stein, it's the legislation update. It's been a busy time in Tallahassee, and over the last 4 weeks, we had an update that Laura Shepis gave last month. It's been busy in Tallahassee, but there's also been a lot of significant changes from
when we last met. In particular, our local delegation has been open to hearing the concerns, and our city council members have been open to helping hear the concerns of how some of the bills might have impacted us. A month ago, one of the bills had some language that would have removed the transfer and the contribution that we make to the city. And now that has changed and will allow a transfer to occur. There was some language a month ago about the Public Service Commission would be responsible for setting rates. And then there may have been other impacts that we were still not clear about, and that language has been removed. And so today, the picture is brighter with the Public Service Commission language being pulled from that, and with the cooperation of our local delegation, our local elected officials, I think that we are making pretty good progress. Now, we have to keep a focus on it. We've got a government relations team that is paying attention to that, and we have people in Tallahassee that are working with us every day to be sure that we are doing the best thing we can do to protect Northeast Florida and protect the appropriate local control that you all have as board members appointed by the city council. The opening video this month that we played highlighted Carissa C., who's electrical instrumentation tech, Regina Nyberger, process chemistry technician, and Regina Owens, a storekeeper at Northside Generating Station. They're just a few of the 481 women that deliver business excellence every day to JEA. This is Women in History Month, and we have women in every aspect of our business, from electric system engineers to managers of media production that produces the video. Every role and every woman is vital to JEA, the livelihood of the communities that we serve. And I'm proud to be on a leadership team with 5 of the 8 of us are women. So thank you for letting us celebrate women in trade in particular. Also, remember that sometimes I think of things that I didn't write down. But we have a team of women that are competing in Toronto. We also have a team of men that are competing in Toronto in the American Water Works Association Operations Challenge. And we're really proud that they are going to represent us there. The Operations Challenge is similar to the line worker competition. And I know that the last several months we've recognized some of these groups, the line worker and the water teams, for winning competitions, but I don't want to take it for granted, because our team members, some of them that you see on the screen now, are using their skills to show how safely they can operate and do the work that they do. And I want to congratulate all the JEA journeymen and apprentices who competed at the beginning of March at the Florida Municipal Electric Association's line worker competition in Orlando. Don't want to just recognize the team members climbing poles. It takes a lot of effort, coaches, judges, and other support staff to keep that going. I am also excited to let you all know that we were recognized with the Florida Municipal Electric Association 2022 Safety Award. So thank you to each team member that each day keeps in mind safety is one of the priorities, along with integrity and respect in everything that we do. We're going to spend a fair amount of time today talking about the integrated resource plan. This plan is primarily focused in this shorter term 7 to 8 year window, but there's information in the IRP for long term on where we might be able to go. There's been a lot of changes to our industry outside of our influence over the last 10 or 15 years. Our energy load has remained flat for the past 12 to 13 years. But we believe that's going to start to change as we see increased electric use from electric vehicles and other electrification. So we're going to be discussing some potential goals with you that really kind of revolve around clean energy, carbon reduction, energy efficiency. I hope you will also hear our plans to lead the way in Northeast Florida by supporting and supplying 100% of JEA's internal electric needs with clean energy.
we're not detailing the plan today. We want to talk about the goals, talk about one path to reach some of those goals. And then we will revisit our IRP in the next 3 or 4 years because the world is changing faster than it had changed in the last 10 or 15 years. We need to be able to look at our plans and adjust them. We also want to be sure that we don't set goals that are unachievable because technology is changing so quickly. So we'll hear about our job from the IRP to remain supplying electricity that is affordable, sustainable, and reliable. Thank you for your continued support. Thank you for your continued service to the community. You're one of the reasons that local control works well is when you have really good board members making really good decisions to help all of us do our jobs better every day so that everyone in the community can do their jobs better every day. Thank you for your time being here, and thank you to the public for commenting today.
Jay, thank you. And again, thanks for the public. We are listening. It's a difficult task. We're making decisions for a long period of time, and the transition takes time. So I appreciate not only the IRP process, but you including voices of the public in this IRP process. And we're working to make the best decisions possible for the future of our community.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
Yes, thank you, Chris Stein and members of the board. Good morning. My name is Stephanie Monroe, and I'm the Director of Enterprise Analytics at JEA. I had the privilege to join JEA about 3 months ago, and one of the functions of my role in my team will be to elevate the use of data and analytics across the enterprise in order to bring meaningful insights and information to understand our performance and support data-driven decision-making. So today's corporate scorecard performance update includes data through February 28th, 2023. For this month's update, there have not been many changes since last month, and the majority of JEA's performance metrics are currently on track. This month, we are pleased to highlight the results of our recent employee engagement survey. The survey was fielded in February, which returned a score of 82, 3 points higher than the previous survey conducted in June of 2022. We are encouraged to see this metric improve and eager to share more insights regarding JEA's strengths and opportunities with the board. In prior months this fiscal year, we reported that JEA's sanitary sewer overflows metric was at risk. We are happy to report that this metric is now on track. We continue to increase our monitoring and cleaning efforts to reduce clogged lines and have an aggressive manhole inspection program to evaluate and prioritize work. We are also pleased to report that JEA is seeing lower fuel and purchase power expense, primarily driven by lower projected natural gas basis prices, purchase power prices, and Northside solid fuel prices. This metric also impacts revenue as we see lower fuel and purchase power revenue, which is a function of lower fuel and purchase power expense. Finally, pay for performance is currently projected at 3.5% of base salaries. As an addition this month, we've included the historical trends for each of our scorecard metrics. While this concludes the monthly performance update, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any comments?
I mean, the sanitary overflow still seems to be going up, but the comment was that it's back under control when you look at this chart.
Ray, do you have any specifics on that? I think we had, but that is interesting.
Yeah,
Does look like
I mean, that was the one that concerned me. It's the one she highlighted as a positive. So.
I think that's interesting. On the previous chart, when you look at for the entire year, there was a goal that was set for the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the last meeting, if we kept at that, we would have exceeded that goal. There it is, the 0.66. But with the latest information, we're trending downward. So do not expect to exceed the 0.6x. And this is kind of hard to look at in out of context, but we rate ourselves against other agencies, other utilities, and so there's benchmark data. And if you're below that data, and this is per 100 miles of pipe, because there will be sanitary sewer overflows. Of course, our goal is 0. But we rate ourselves against that benchmark data. And so it's trending in the right area. And it's also, we don't have that information, but also less than what we had last year as well.
So the frequency slowed down. It's still, we're still adding to it. So we're still increasing per 100 miles of pipe, but we've slowed down a little bit. We'll take a look at it. Be sure we can show the improvement.
I was pleased to see the fuel and purchase power expense trending down. So the information that you shared with us relative to fuel cost and base rates looks like that's going to play out the way we expected. So that was good to see.
And the one thing I've talked to Jay about is the capital spend, and that's something that you and Ted should come back to. But how do we manage that, and how do we manage that appropriately with supply chain inflation and delivery of this capital? So Jay and Ted are focused on this. I think the next board meeting would be worth kind of getting a presentation of how do you plan on, in this world that we live in today, managing this. Yeah.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the engagement results. At 3 point, it's a huge increase. So thanks to all the rank and file who filled out your surveys. And as always, I'm going to be very interested. I'm going to ask all the time, when do we get our updated residential customer satisfaction scores?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Tom Van Osdol. I had a question along the same lines. I appreciate the trended data points in time relative to employee engagement and customer service, but I'm curious about external reference. How do those data points and performance compare to top decile, best in the country?
In terms of the residential customer satisfaction survey, we received an update last week, and we are no longer in the 4th quartile.
Sheila, can you speak up yet?
Yes, we surpassed many other utilities, and we are placed in the 2nd quartile as of this most recent survey. Now, the survey is an annual recap of our performance. So when we average the first survey wave, which places us in the 4th quartile, to this wave, which places us in the 2nd quartile, our average for the year is 3rd quartile. And we're seeing very positive signs from the activities that we've performed over the last several months to try to recover from that first wave where the price impact was so significant.
I would suggest that most people that do customer survey scores don't blend the two, that they go with the most recent, but we'll let you guys discuss that.
No, but Mark, that's a good point.
I mean, no
Yeah.
company blends the two together. They go with what the most recent score is. So I'll let y'all debate that.
We can look at that. Laura, do you have?
Yeah, for the employee engagement information, great update from our organization this past February. Interestingly, at the same time, across the 510 plus companies that the third-party provider that we conduct our survey through also updated their benchmarks. So top quartile would be in that mid-70s range. They have debriefed with our team and have shared what truly is notable to them is to see the jump in the overall engagement numbers. So Marty calling that out is something they told us is actually very notable. And although in the last survey that we conducted, we did score in above the benchmark, much higher against the benchmark this time around. So that's a really positive thing. And we have a lot of good strengths to build off and some opportunities we're going to pay attention to and bring to you all to talk through.
We also are working towards, one of the things, Stephanie Monroe did the presentation today. One of the things that her team is going to work on is more benchmarks to be able to answer the questions that you all have on. We need to be really, really good against what we are doing, but we also need to be able to measure against what other organizations are doing. And some of these organizations, like for the customer satisfaction for utilities, we'll be comparing ourselves against utilities. Or employee engagement, it's across all industries, lots of different types of industries. And so we're going to start working on and getting better benchmark data to bring that back, because it's a good measure for us to know how we compare to others. Thank you.
Well, Tom and Marty, thanks for your thoughts, and I think indeed for getting their input.
Yep.
Any other questions, thoughts? General, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Finance and Operations Committee met on March 10th, and along with committee members Marty Lanahan and Rick Morales, we're also joined by John Baker. The committee heard 4 presentations for action, which are listed under the consent agenda for your consideration. The first was by Renetta Curry Marshall, Chief Operating Officer, who discussed the interlocal agreement with Jacksonville Port Authority, raising the transmission lines over the Fulton Cut crossing. So 6 high voltage electric transmission lines across the St. John Rivers at the Fulton Cut crossing situated near Blunt Island. Jacksport identified that increasing the height of these transmission lines 50 feet, so raising it from 175 to 225 feet, will improve the conditions for the size and types of ships anticipated to pass the water crossing. On June 27th, the memorandum of agreement to memorialize their commitment for JEA to conduct the project subject to full funding by Jacksport was executed. JEA and Jacksport have agreed to enter into a binding interlocal agreement for the completion of the work contingent upon Jacksport securing the funding. The current project estimate is just over $43 million, and with the current funding identified by Jacksport at $45 million. JEA is responsible for completing the work, and Jacksport is responsible for securing the funding. Gary Baker, Senior Director, Energy Operations, discussed the Southeast Energy Exchange Market, SEAM, and JEA's Open Access Transmission Tariff. The SEAM has been developed by many utilities in the Southeast for a 15-minute market to supplement existing hourly, daily, and monthly energy trading markets. This market does not replace any markets that JEA and the Energy Authority currently participate in. This market opportunity will provide additional energy cost savings as well as potential revenues to JEA and its customers. This will cost $50,000 upfront and is expected to save anywhere between $250,000 to $500,000 annually. And Regina Ross, Chief Legal Officer, discussed appointment and delegation of authority to execute Florida Department of Transportation documents. This item is purely administrative. JEA completes the transactions with Florida Department of Transportation. The purpose of this item is to request approval to allow the board to appoint and delegate authority to individuals to approve and execute certain documents. The required delegation and special power of attorney form identifies the titles of each JEA representative to approve and sign specific document types. And then Heather Beard, Manager Procurement Contract Administration, discussed the procurement code. The JEA charter requires a biannual review of the code. The benefit to updating the procurement code is to maintain current and best practice procurement policies and processes for JEA so we can achieve the maximum values from our procurement activities. Heather provided the committee with the updates to Article 2, 4, and 5 as outlined in your materials. And then we also heard additional presentations for information on first. Randall Barnes, Treasurer, briefed us on the annual disclosure reports. This is an item that JEA reviews on an annual basis. JEA is required to file ADRs with the Municipal Security Rulemaking Board to comply with investor continuing disclosure obligations. The ADRs contain financial and operating information for each of our systems and are included by reference in the bond issuance and reoffering documents. The updated draft ADRs will be distributed shortly and brought before the board at the April 25th meeting for our consideration. And Russell Cafey, Controller, provided a quarterly financial review. Bottom line is Q1 got us on track to have a strong year. Our metrics for our electric and water systems are on target, and fuel costs appear to have leveled out, potentially offering customers relief in the near future. We had a rating agency presentation by Joe Alfano, Vice President, Financial Services, and as mentioned in last month's CEO report, provided the committee with a review of the presentation as presented to the 3 bonding rating agencies. Presentations can be found in the materials distributed. Staff is available today should board members have any questions. And finally, the Electric Integrated Resource Plan update. Later in today's meeting, you'll receive a presentation from Renetta Curry-Marshall, Chief Operating Officer, and Pedro Melendez, Vice President for Planning, Engineering, and Construction. The key is here is we are now pivoting to the goals and eventual implementation plan. I'd like to recognize Renetta Marshall, Laura Shepis, Pedro Melendez, and all of your team members, the community members of the IRP Stakeholders Advisory Group for all your hard work, as well as those that have attended the board meetings to offer public comment, as said earlier. You are helping to shape JEA's energy mix for the future. We appreciate the feedback received from our customers. That's all I have. Standing by for any questions.
General, thank you for your presentation. John?
Have we heard anything from the rating agency?
There's not an update on the rating agencies, and we don't expect there to be a change until likely when we issue new debt, which is a little bit of a moving target, but we got positive feedback from them, but not a change in any number.
I have one comment. It's, today with the banking situation where it is today, everybody's focused on a mismatched book. I think credit is going to be an issue. We've got a lot of cash, and it'd be worth Jay and you, Ted, really focusing in on a thought process on what are we doing with our cash? How are we thinking about that? Because I think it's something nobody ever thought about, but today is a very important situation.
Chair Stein, we plan at the next F&O committee meeting this month to bring changes to our investment policy to just go right at that you're talking about. So we will be taking that to the committee later next month, and then that will roll to the board at the next board meeting in the next month.
Good, Ted. Any other comments, thoughts?
I wouldn't wait till next month.
To change the investment policy. We'll take a look at it. If there's something we need to do on a faster basis that's going to change anything, we'll call back together. I don't think we can, the investment policy has got to be approved by the board, so we'll get that to you as soon as we can. But we'll take a look at it and see if there's anything that has to happen. In fact, what we can do, Ted, what we can do is provide a summary update, interim summary update to you on what it is right now, so we're sure we're not missing anything.
But if you want to make changes, I think John makes a good point. Let's go ahead and maybe have a special board meeting if we need to.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Any other comments? Jody?
Good morning.
What?
Consent agenda.
Okay, excuse me, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Motion passes. Jody?
Good morning, Chair Stein, board members. It's that time of year to elect officers. I'm Jody Brooks, the Chief Administrative Officer, and I have the pleasure to serve with Chair Lanahan on the Governance, Audit, and Compliance Committee as the leadership team member. At our January meeting, we discussed a slate of officers that, based upon your policy manual, is to be elected at this board meeting, the first meeting in March. Term starts April 1st. For continuity purposes, at that meeting of the Governance, Audit, and Compliance Committee in January, there was a discussion about continuity. And the suggestion or the recommendation was to continue to have Mr. Stein chair, Ms. Lanahan be the vice chair, and Mr. DeSalvo, General DeSalvo, to be secretary for another year's term starting next month. So it's my pleasure to recommend the slate of officers. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it back to you to take a motion and to elect the slate.
I'll make a motion, we accept that slate.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Jody, back with you on the Plant Vogel update.
Thank you again, Chair Stein and members of the board. Jody Brooks, Chief Administrative Officer, here to give the update on Plant Vogel. We were very excited at the beginning of this month. The Unit 3 turned on. So nuclear power were starting to be generated. On March 6th, we got notice from the Georgia Power had made the announcement that they had reached initial criticality. So they're in the testing mode and bringing the Unit 3 online. On March 9th, we got another good report that they had reached mode 1 and exceeded the 5% level. We've been getting almost daily, sometimes twice a day, announcements about when it gets synced with the grid. Until we can get it synced with the grid and get it fully operational. The commercial operation date had been suggested would be about around May 9th. As of this morning, I got a message from MEAG that they still have not worked out all the challenges with getting it synced to the grid. So that commercial operation date may be moving to about mid-May. But you'll see on our table, we're saying May, June of 2023 of the commercial operational date for Unit 3. Very exciting. Again, I'll go back to the Gate River Run. We're on that last mile, but maybe we're in the last quarter mile. So hopefully the next meeting in Unit 3 will have a better report on a commercial operation for the Plant Vogel nuclear power plant in our portfolio.
On Unit 4, do we have any update on Unit 4?
We don't really have another update on Unit 4 other than the fuel loading. And again, they're continuing to do the things to get it commercial operational, but there hasn't been any shift in the timing of Unit 3 coming on in 2024.
We'll start transitioning the discussion to Unit 4 in the next couple of months as we now will do parallel discussions like we had last. They've reached hot functional testing they're ready to do. So we're making progress similar to what Unit 3 was, and the last dates they're talking about are December, January of 24. We still have it in our planning documents later than that, but we are. I realize every month we're now saying this, but we're talking about weeks instead of months now on Unit 3, and so it's an exciting step in our process.
So I understand it. We're paying interest only. And then once Unit 3 comes online, we start paying principal. Is that correct?
That is correct. Joe, behind me, to give a thumbs up.
We're paying principal only, and we'll start paying interest.
Okay. Okay.
And the purchase of the power cost.
So last month we shared a couple of charts on that. So once it is online, both Unit 3 and Unit 4, the principal and interest payment is 240 million. Total.
Debt service.
Debt service all.
Slightly north of 160 million of that. 230 total is debt service.
Got it. So the other piece of this that we don't spend as much time talking about, but the team that has to and gets to start using that electricity has to watch when that actually sinks and whenever we use it, when we actually start to not need some of the other resources. But as soon as it comes online, it will be a significant amount of clean energy that it ties in with some of the goals for the IRP, which may be next on the agenda.
Any other questions? Ray, Pedro?
Thank you, Chair Stein. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So good morning, board members. So we are pleased to present an update on the Electric Integrated Resource Plan. We want this to be an interactive dialogue with the board as well as with my colleagues here. The distinction with this update as compared to previous updates that we've done in the past is that as we finalize this 2023 IRP, just like General DeSaville said, we're pivoting from the planning process to actually considering and developing goals and to discussing those underlying plans that are going to help to support those goals. So the conceptual goals that we're going to be discussing today, and these are our near-term goals, were first presented earlier this month at the F&O committee meeting. And we received, I believe, some excellent feedback from the committee members. We had good questions concerning implementation, timelines, cost of implementation, and the quality of the goals. Are they easy to obtain? Are they stretch goals? Basically, let's put all of this into context. So today's presentation touches on all those points. So I'm getting us started. I'm going to provide some background information, going to introduce the conceptual goals. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Melendez to go deeper into the underlying draft plans. So just a brief refresher on the IRP process and report. So as you see here, we began this back in September of 2021, and we held the first of 8 stakeholder meetings between January of 22, and the last meeting was February of 23. We've had a very, I think, robust engagement with our stakeholders, and you've heard from a few of them earlier today under public comment. Our final meeting is scheduled for May. As I mentioned before, we've also briefed the board at key milestones along the way with the most recent briefing at the F&O committee meeting. The process was intense. It included modeling, sensitivity analysis. We landed on 6 scenarios, and all of this with a balance of reliability, affordability, and sustainability. So the results from the IRP have indicated a need for adding significantly more solar, a high efficiency gas resource. We anticipate conducting another IRP in the next 3 to 4 years as the landscape continues to evolve and technologies continue to evolve. And we're going to look at identifying goals for beyond the 2030 timeframe. So here are the potential near-term goals. Produce 35% clean energy. And with that, we mean non-fossil fuels, including Vogel, as my colleague Jody has just talked about, and renewable solar and battery. Retire less efficient generating units. And in this case, we're talking about Unit 3 at Northside, which is one of our older units. Have 80% reduction of our CO2 emissions from the 2005 baseline level when the current air quality standards were put into place. Have 100% of JEA facilities served by clean energy. We believe that we should be setting the example. This will be achieved both by carving out of our portfolio for JEA facilities, as well as siting solar at some of our facilities. An example of this is our near coming water purification demonstration facility. Offset the increased demand from electrification, as we see with electric vehicles, electric fleets, what have you, and offset that with enhanced energy efficiency programs. To achieve these goals, it is going to take teams across this organization. So this is not just a brick and mortar solution, not just engineering and construction, but it's also going to include our customer programs. It's going to include strategy. It's going to include communication. It's going to include finance, of course, and it's going to include the water side of the business. So everyone that's sitting here is going to have a part to play in this. I'm now going to turn it over to Pedro as we talk about our draft path. And this is one path, and we want a lot of discussion on this as we talk about conceptual goals. So Pedro came into JEA during the second half of the IRP. And I'm sure he goes, what the heck happened here? He's hit the ground running, and he has led the team, and the team is online as well. He has led the team successfully in managing this process to this point. And so with that, Pedro.
Thanks, Ms. Marshall, for this opportunity to represent the hard work of many people.
So everybody needs to remember the first week Pedro was in our new JEA family, he had the hurricane.
Yes, absolutely. So good morning, Bobby. Now we call you Bobby, Chair, members of the governing board. Yes, today marks 6 months believe it or not, since joining JEA. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for the warm welcome to this great team. I'm excited to be here, happy to present today, well, knowing that I'm not alone. I have a great team here that have worked tirelessly on this IRP. So I want to say thank you to all of them. It is an honor for me really to represent all of you. So with the completion of the IRP modeling in collaboration with stakeholders, JEA is now moving towards near-term plans and recommendations resulting from the IRP to meet potential goals that we're presenting today. So there are things included here that are either solidified or under development for our discussion. I invite you to ask me questions along the way, so please feel free to stop me as I go along. The idea is for us to be able to provide you enough clarity. So we'll spend a significant amount of time really in this slide itself. Let's do a walkthrough. In 2022, JEA served 2% of its energy demand utilizing 39 megawatts of solar and achieved 53% reduction in carbon emissions since 2005. By the end of this year, JEA anticipates serving 7% of the energy demand with the upcoming addition of 103 megawatts of input from Vogtle 3 unit, which we just heard an update today, and the recently ratified power purchase agreement with FPL for 150 megawatts of solar starting next month. In 2024, JEA may serve up to 10% of its demand with clean energy, which is 5 times more than in 2022. We expect the addition of Vogtle Unit 4 in late 2024. We just had that conversation to continue building this clean energy portfolio. We have good news to share today. Our team, led by Rick Erickson, VP of Electric Systems, has been working for several months on a solar power purchase agreement with Florida Municipality Power Agency, also called FMPA, and have made progress for up to 100 megawatts of the potential 150 megawatts addition by 2026. This FMPA addition requires further transmission system studies to optimize the amount of solar being added. This is a new initiative, and we have this in the agenda for the next Finance and Operations Committee meeting. This should enable JEA reaching up to 18% of clean energy and 63% reduction in carbon emissions since 2005. As the board is aware, we initiated an RFP through the Energy Authority to develop 4 JEA sites. They're doing this on our behalf as a partner in this process. We have a great deal of interest on these ongoing RFP. With proposals due this Friday, the team will review the proposals to determine a short list of qualified responders for further evaluation. We expect the completion of the selection by the end of June. And we believe there is potential of adding up to 450 megawatts of solar and batteries to serve JEA customers with up to 28% clean energy by 2028. To appropriately integrate these new solar resources, JEA is performing a comprehensive transmission system analysis. This will come easy. There's a lot of work to be able to accomplish this. To achieve a 35% clean energy goal by 2030, JEA still need to add 525 megawatts of solar battery, as illustrated in this slide. The sites for these 525, where they're going to come from, is unidentified this time. The IRP model of resource indicates also the need for a new, more efficient combined cycle natural gas generating plant to serve JEA customers. We have an ongoing feasibility study in anticipation for the Florida Power Plant Siting Act process to achieve this goal. There's a great deal of efforts to make this happen by 2030 for all across the organization. I heard about the question about, are these stretch goals? The IRP, well, this is feasible. The IRP considered 30% when it was studied. We're stretching it to 35. The IRP modeling indicates a potential 75 reduction in carbon emissions. We're stretching it to 80. We're doing this within 6 to 7 years time frame. Basically, we have to think in the future. We have to build around 17 sites need to be built or contracted, with additional transmission needs to be identified, built, constructed, put in service, and also a combined cycle in this time period. It will take all of us to be able to achieve these goals.
Let me ask a question, and it shows my stupidity, but some of the solar needs to be built with new transmission.
Yes, sir.
How do you price transmission?
So there are two factors in here, and I'll ask Gary to help me out a little bit. So there's the one is internal that we'll be able to build. We actually put it inside of our system. There is the transmission services that come in and utilize the tariff you actually pay without wheeling into the system.
But how's that tariff created?
So Gary, can you help me out a little bit how it's done at JEA, just to make sure we get the right folks in this one?
No, I've been always, I've always focused on megawatt costs, but never transmission costs. And
Total understand. So I'll let Gary answer because JEA is his own balancing authority, so he can help with it. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Ward. Transmission providers, for rules, have to provide tariff rates and standard terms and conditions. For JEA, generally the transmission is either from FPL or Southern Company, depending on the energy from the north or from the south. That's generally. But standard terms and conditions, FP, if you have a 5-year commitment, you get long-term firm, and you basically could roll it over on a 5-year increment. Generally, it's expensive. That's a fair amount. If you saw, I think F&O about a month ago, we did the FPL PPA. It would be similar to that. The energy price was in the 40s, and the megawatt added on a 28% capacity factor for a solar facility. That's another $13 a megawatt to the price. Recognize we're building, there's going to be lots of solar building. There's a lot of changes in the transmission system all around us. As those changes happen, tariff changes, cost changes, no one provides a fixed tariff price for long-term. Most of them provide you got a cost this year, and they go to FERC for approvals either on a formula rate, or they go there and make a presentation for what kind of costs they might be able to get from approval from FERC.
And FERC, what kind of return is FERC allow these transmission?
Don't know exactly, but they're in the 10 to 12%.
But I can speak to that one a little bit better if I can, because I came from that side of the world. Somewhere between 10 to 12 is the range. Most are around 9.95. It's the return on and off of investments.
Okay.
That's true.
Yep.
Help me with my arithmetic. It was my understanding that Vogel was going to be 13% of our power. Why do we only go from 2 to 10? We have both.
It's a good question. It's timing, right? The unit is going to, I'll use this year as an example. Let's say it goes online, Vogel 3 goes online this year at the middle of the year. We're only going to have it available for half the year. Then it will be full next year, so we can account for 100% of it being next year for Vogel 3. That is accounted in this number. It's just more about timing issue. As you accumulate it, you will see it all coming together. So yes, it will be 13%.
I think it's slightly less than 13%.
In the future, it starts going down because we see the load continue going up.
So by 2030 with load increasing, then it drops to something a little bit less than that.
Yes.
When it was put on over the last few years, it might have been in that range, but we expect it 10, 11, 10%. It moves a little bit based on the usage.
What are we thinking that the electrification of automobiles is going to do to our load?
Increase it, but we don't know how much. And that's part of the reason we need to redo another IRP update in 3 or 4 years, and then again in 3 or 4 years. We have one of the models was of increased electrification. If you or Ray want to.
Yeah, I see.
Why don't we go, I think the last.
Can you please move to the last slide? It shows the plus and minus on that one.
The last slide of this.
The last slide of this, yeah.
Right before the.
Yep, right here.
There you go.
So Rough numbers, let's put them on in 2030 just to kind of help you see this number. 434 gigawatts per hour is around 4% of what we will be serving that here, just that's what we're forecasting. That is going to come from electrification from vehicles, equipment, fleet vehicles, commercial, industrial processes that are going to basically have that additional demand that we expect about 4%.
And the current is 29.
The current amount of megawatts that we serve, let me go back to my notes in here, is for this year is 94. We expect to come from electrification.
So we're seeing a quadruple, at least a quadruple increase is what the modeling is telling us.
And our plant will be able to provide what percentage of that growth as we look at it?
So there's two things you're going to see in this graph that I have in front of you, which is we are expanding our energy efficiency programs to get better so we can offset that. 434 is one of our stretch goals. There's about 10% of these 434 that we need to stretch ourselves to be able to cover it, to reduce the need of having another plant.
So one of the last bullet on the goals that we're talking about has to do with the electrification. And Laura, if you want, can you talk a little bit about the current EV program? And then underneath, the idea is that similar to what we heard from some of the public comments, is that we will work with distributed resources, energy efficiency, demand side management to offset that growth.
Yes, there's a couple of things that I think are important to understand when we're talking about our full suite of electrification offerings to our customers. We currently have something that is for personal electric vehicles. It is largely focused on concierge, less on infrastructure for charging, although we do have accounted for in our IRP scenarios what we're seeing in terms of growth for public charging stations. The reality is most people that own an electric vehicle choose to charge it in their homes at night, so that we have to account for that when we're thinking about our larger scale demand side management that we could anticipate from residential. The other side of that is the fleet electrification. So think about forklifts that are currently operated off of gas that might shift to electric, other types of utility type vehicles that we would use. We're going to make sure we're leading the way. So I'm excited in our customer workforce committee coming up. You're going to get a little bit deeper dive, better glimpse into what's happening with our fleet electrification programs, the growth of that program. And then in the April board meeting, we've invited one of the experts from the Electric Power Research Institute to join us and walk us through what's happening at the national level around electrification and for electric vehicles. So more to come. It'll be a little deeper dive in the next month, but it supports what we are currently planning for in electrification.
It becomes the key long-term question for how much do we need of energy efficiency and how much do we need of supply. And so we have, again, in agreement with some of the comments that the public was suggesting, to be able for us to be more flexible with how we are doing distributed energy resources, how we can help support those customers that want to use solar. How do we support that appropriately over the long term is the other piece of this, so we can offset some of that growth.
Rick has
I understand the JEA has a program for personal charging at your home that they give you a discount, or there's a credit or whatever for charging at night.
Yes.
And so I would assume at night, assume there's no solar energy.
A lot of us, yes.
So we're really using let's call it the dirtiest power, because right now we have no battery storage, or the most polluting storage at this point to really charge these cars.
Vogel's 92% capacity factor, clean energy that is going to be online.
And
so that's 24 hours.
So, but at this point,
right now, yeah.
But I would assume the reason the energy use is substantially lower at night. And that's why.
So you want to talk about the peak demand versus energy use?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get a little bit into that when we look at how we are actually managing that portfolio in one of those slides, but just to help a little bit, yes, you are correct. Today, to be able to serve this charging at night, we're actually utilizing our current fleet, which is a combination of gas and solid fuel. So I totally understand that. And that's why we're trying to find a way to offset it with the use of nuclear, with the use of some our growth in the solar and also batteries by 2030, which is what I'm showing in the screen. Is like, imagine during 2030, how can we utilize that fleet to offset and use more clean energy to support it?
You know, one of the advantages of these electric cars is the smart version of them. Is you can take it, okay, charge from this time to this time. Where, you know, with a gasoline powered car, you have to charge when you run out.
And we can work with our customers to help look at that. We look at our rate and help with that. But you're right. Typically, historically, the least power that we're using is in the nighttime.
Sure.
Peaks, morning and afternoon, depending on winter or summer.
Early evening.
Yeah, we're seeing across the industry, I'll make a comment, just across the industry, we're seeing that the bell curve we used to see start flattening out a little bit, in which we actually getting higher demand at night, which is basically, yeah. So there's.
Due to charging?
Yes, that is correct. Due to charging, due to people being at home and utilizing. So that's why the energy efficiencies programs are helping us to kind of manage that long term. But yes, it's starting to flatten out, but the demand's still there. But it just happens to not be a bell curve, it's more flat. We're seeing at the edges at the beginning of the day, or at the end of the days, we're starting to see that coming up. But good observation.
But change the subjects again, as transmission is going to be a big cost.
Yes.
And it needs to be thought through. Like building.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's combined cycle or solar, transmission is going to be a big player.
Absolutely.
In these decisions. And I think when we talk about IRP, I think we got to look at transmission also.
So if you can go back to where we left off at the beginning.
Can we stay here just
Sorry.
real quick? So sorry. The customer owned solar, I've suggested in the past that we workshop, you know, what does rooftop, what can we do to help residents who want to use solar energy? I mean, not today, but I really do want to know where we are and where we're going, especially if it's going to be a big component of 2030.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that is going to be not only a residential, but commercial. So we have one project that has just come online with the Jaguars at the new practice facility. And we have several other larger customers that have some sites to be able to use that. And we have our own, we are one of our largest customers. And so we can use our work. So I think you're right. We're going to do more work on that with the distributed energy resources team. Absolutely.
When we're talking about the heavy lifting and that it's going to take a team. So the goals are conceptual, but the underlying, you see here five areas, but those underlying programs and policies will need to be looked at. And what is the best way, both for JEA as well as for our customers to help support?
Well, Sheila and her team are real close to, I think, 15 houses in historic East Side to start our pilot on weatherization. So that's going to be a big component of this as well.
Any questions on this one?
Yeah, Pedro, so out through 2028, do we have the real estate for the solar farms, or are we going to need to buy more real estate? I'm still sort of fuzzy on how much land we have to accommodate or not.
So the current JEA sites, we have enough potential in the lands that we own to do 450.
Okay.
So we see it also, or I'll call it enough potential inside of our territory. To answer your question, Bob, in regards to transmission, we can actually, we are going to study it, but it will be a lot easier to do, less cost effective. We have enough inside of our footprint to get to 450.
Okay.
The question is going to come about is timing, supply chain. All these things are going to get, but we do have enough in our footprint to do 450. There are some opportunities in the north side of the territory that we're also exploring. in addition to the current sites that we own, that should enable us to get there.
One thing I make, Pedro, is we've owned these sites for a long time. Past, made some bad decisions at Parker, but we gotta, we can study all we need, but we need to giddy up and go on these 4 or 5 sites. Yeah.
If I can touch on that just a little bit, Pedro, great question, General DeSalvo, and comments. So as Pedro had said with this presentation, some of this is galvanized now. Vogel, the FPL, PPA, but as you go from left to right, there's less certainty. So we're excited about the RFP and getting the proposals in for the JEA sited solar, but that 525, thank you, sir, the 525 megawatts of additional solar, those sites have not been identified. It might be JEA, it might be within our territory, it might be PPA. We're having discussions, and we keep having discussions, and that's how the FMPA, PPA happened, that Mr. Erickson worked on. But there's less certainty as you go from left to right. And I'm saying that to say this, there's much work to be done.
And thank you for listening to our committee. I think we pushed a little around stretch and make sure that, we had a goal that we were really pushing, because we're talking 2030. I think the first percent was 30% that you presented to us. So I applaud you for putting the stake in the ground and acknowledging how much work you're going to have to do to get to 35.
I think, I'm not sure we hit on this. All of these, even with the stretch, the information that we're getting is and providing is least cost alternatives. So these are the models are calling for our least cost alternatives whenever we're doing it, even with these stretch goals.
And of course, we want more. So, keep stretching.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I've got one quick question.
Absolutely, Tom.
Zooming out, just thinking about the context for all of this, and particularly to help lay individuals understand the importance of this pathway and the aggressiveness of the goals, et cetera. I just encourage the team to continue to work on sort of what I would call the if-then statements around this 35%. So if we achieve, hopefully when, not if we achieve the 35%, then what? What's better as a function of our having achieved these goals? We've talked a little bit about costs and operating efficiencies, ROI, but I mean, to cast the vision around reductions in emissions and pollutants and increase in quality of life, increase in capacity, even connections or enablers into subsequent economic development. I think it would be helpful to understand. So what's the if then if we're able to achieve all of these, and sort of the whole question about to what end, if you will.
I think, Tom, as always, you make great comments, a lot better articulated than I could ever do. But that was, I think, so well. And the other thing is, what have we looked at in the electrification of our vehicle?
Yeah. So I appreciate the way that you framed that. I think the work that we've got to do on the IRP study itself comes with the draft that you've seen doesn't have an executive summary yet, and it doesn't have the cover letters that we will put in. And I think we can touch on some of those and summarize a piece of that. And then we will have, this may be a little out of order, but we'll have, Laura, is it May 25th?
25th.
May 25th. Talking about the ideas today, then we will bring more firm, here's what we would like to recommend to you at your next board meeting. And then in May, we'll have a public meeting to share what those are. And we'll certainly add to the concept of what you just talked about on the if and then and why. Why is this important and why should we be doing this? And I think we can put all that in that package. And then it is a continued discussion. I don't want it to be lost on the team of people that have been working on this IRP for us to not think that doing another IRP in 3 years is not a stretch goal just in itself. It takes a lot of time, effort, and work to do this. And we, as I said in my report, we have had flat energy usage for 10 or 12 years. And to your point, we're not going to have that anymore. And it changes the way we have to plan and the way we have to provide for the people in Northeast Florida. And so that's why the stretch of even doing another IRP is a big deal.
Thank you. Great discussion.
John?
There's been a lot of commentary about the building the new gas plant. And I think it would be, I'd like to understand the numbers, what's driving the decision, why we do that instead of do more solar and just go ahead and bite the bullet. And
Just break.
reliability is a big deal. I understand that.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Pedro walk through what it takes and why that makes sense. But I also want to say that these are 2030 are stretch goals, but it became pretty clear to us that in order to even be able to reach those goals, we needed to start some of this process already. And so Pedro can walk through some of the steps on the natural gas decision and the plan itself. But we all already worked with, and you all approved a solar project in January. And we have worked with the RFP that will be coming back on Friday for the solar sites that are ours. We have worked with and continue to work with Vogel to bring that one online. And we've worked to get the preliminary kind of beginnings of the preliminary work on a natural gas plant, all of which are decisions that we could stop or change if the goals that we're talking about were there. But in order to meet these types of goals, we need to get some of that ball rolling. So you want to talk about the gas plant, why that decision is in there?
I definitely appreciate this question. I'll give you some information today. We initiated a feasibility study to determine the location, to determine the availability of the constructability of a plant in our footprint. There are more steps in consideration, so like an economic development, resiliency, reliability, sustainability before we make any selections. Gas reservation continue also being a challenge that we have. We're also future proofing, testing if we actually build this plant and when. Is it viable to actually have bulk storage of hydrogen or other fuels? Having carbon capture and sequestration to be part of the process. What regulations we need to be paying attention to, which we are, and getting that input into the process to ensure that we, if and when we build this plant, that we're able to convert them into future technologies to continue in response to lowering carbon emissions. I want to share a few items that I think is important, what it takes to do it. I think that was your point. To build a plant takes about 5 years. It's a 5-year process. It takes about 45 months to construct it to get it commercially operating by the end of 2029. So there's some steps that we've taken. We have to prepare an RFP process. The need for power process is a process we have to follow with the PSC. It takes about 18 months. We are gearing up ourselves, the ones who are ready to continue this process and bring more information to this group, and we're able to meet these deadlines that we have out there. There are 2 locations we have analyzed, which is Power Park and Greenland. We're not only looking at for adding 571, we're thinking in the future, as I mentioned, can we expand it if there's an optionality before we make a decision? What other options exist out there? We have now made a determination, but we're taking the steps to actually get prepared and start getting some traction. And it's soon, right? 5 years. I just mentioned it's 6 years to an entire plan, 6 years. Takes 5 years to build it, and we have 18 months to get it to the PSC. So the time is now, and that's what we are preparing ourselves for.
But I see it more like 7 to 8 years. I mean, in reality. I mean, that's
with the market, with all the things that are out there, it's definitely it's a fair statement.
Today, we are all go. It's going to between approvals, regulations, and the other thing we hadn't talked about is, can you partner with somebody that makes sense too, to reduce costs?
Yeah, so that is another piece of this, is that we have to look at, and again, some of the public comment even on the discussion around solar, until this last year or so, there was no discussion and decision about whether we should own or purchase because the way the tax laws were written, we couldn't. Now we can. So we need to analyze, should we buy or should we own? The same thing is true with some of the gases. This is how we're proceeding right now. We need to look at the studies and the transmission and the cost. Are we able to buy some of this from outside of our service territory, or do we build it? How do we go about that? And the other piece that this takes us down a little bit of a different path, but all of the new natural gas is also assuming it has a decommissioning of the north side. And right now the plan, the north side unit 3, and there's people there. There's employees that are working there that we have to be aware of. And David, if you want to just be sure we talk about the timeline, the way that we're thinking about this, and that we're being open and transparent and letting them know what's going on too, because it's part of our analysis.
Absolutely, Jay. We've got some pretty aggressive people goals in terms of the folk we're going to need to kind of deliver on these projects. We've got people there that are experienced. We've got people there that know us. We're going to be working very steadfastly we really don't want to ever do layoffs. And so it's really about how do we shape them, how do we help develop them to be broader than maybe what they are today, to accept new roles, but also place them in other facilities. But we want to do that organized. We do have enough time. We've got Pedro, Ricky, and I all committed to figuring this out with us. And so, why start over when you've got a ready set of folk that may be displaced? We just don't know how extended, that displacement would be.
It's just a piece of the puzzle that we have to keep in mind is that every time we talk about this, it is a group of employees that are there that are impacted, and we want to be aware of what they are. And that's why we're trying to talk about it as early as we can and let them know as openly as we can what we're thinking about and give as much time as we can for them.
So one of the things that that Pedro mentioned that I think is worth repeating, we're talking about, ostensibly this high efficiency gas unit, but there's an eye for the future as well. So as technology continues to evolve, can we transfer that unit into hydrogen? Talking about carbon sequestration, you said so much better than I did. So always with an eye for the future. It's almost like, hedging your bets, if you will. So we would not consider this to be a lost asset, but we want to be nimble, take advantage of what we don't know now that could be evolving. And I thought it was very pragmatic to set, we're going to call these near-term goals, do an IRP again, take advantage of the new information and start to set those midterm and long-term goals. But things are already in place. And as you said, Chair Stein, the time period. So we haven't waited. We haven't finalized anything, but we put into place now processes and steps and what have you. You see that on the solar. We also put into place transmission studies and things such as that. So we will be ready.
Did you have a question?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
So I got a real stupid question.
You're around me, Jim.
No, that's what I'm talking about. I've lost the buzz on net metering, but so as solar increases, do we have to be concerned about just any policy, regulatory hurdles that we may have to deal with, or is this a thing in the past that's not a worry? I don't know.
So two things. First, who wants to talk about, we have a policy that in our rate that we were talking about earlier on some of the electric vehicles, some of the solar, some of the distributed energy resources. What I'm suggesting in the part about electrification, the slide that was the up and down we're replacing, is that we've got to be able to have discussions about our process for that. Okay. To your point, we have to have this slide. When we start changing the way that we're doing our business, the customer-owned solar might require some changes in the way we do our billing and our metering and our structure. So I think we have to do that. So it is not a thing of the past. It is a complicated piece of this that we have to have policies put in place both for commercial and, go ahead, Laura.
I just was going to add, we're currently in the process of working with Black and Veatch on a distributed energy resources readiness assessment. Part of that, in combination with the work Pedro's team is doing, looking at our system and its ability to handle these types of distributed assets on our system. One of the things we have to incorporate and pay attention to within both of those efforts is the interconnection standards that are required. So solar as one of those technologies, any of the other kind of distributed resources that would be potential additions to our system, those interconnection standards are something that are across the industry at the national level fairly set. But as we look at that and the policies that need to be incorporated for Jacksonville and for the JEA system, we anticipate that readiness assessment will help us identify where we need to add a little bit of rigor to this.
And then Vogel, and I should know this one. Once it's COD, we're using it for 20 years, right?
We are.
Okay.
Yeah. That's at least as big a deal as what we just talked about.
Okay.
And Jody, can you talk a little bit about so part of the reason that we're looking at 2030, but the model was for 2050. 2050 is beyond when Vogel will not be part of that. But that's a big significant portion of our clean energy goals. And it ends at 20 years from COD. So talk about the back end of Vogel.
Yeah, we only have.
Which is hard to imagine because it's not even up yet, but we're talking about the back end.
Yes, some folks have asked about, well, we can just renew it, right? I mean, after 20 years, and that's not correct. We have the owners, we have the purchase for the first 20 years of Unit 3 and Unit 4. Once we're done after our 20 years of operation, we're out, and the other MEAG communities take the second half. And so there's no opportunity to extend or modify or continue that contract. So it's over 200 megawatts.
But Jody, stop, we can negotiate at any point in time with NEAG to extend that. I mean,
We can always negotiate, but from a distribution perspective, there's cities, we have the option at the end of the 20-year period to negotiate with some of the other off-takers. If there's any in the market to be taken or negotiated with MEAG for continued megawatts from Plant Vogel, it will be a negotiation, and whether or not there's any available in the market or other communities struggling the same way we are from a clean energy portfolio. So just keep in mind, again, we're in a position for 20 years on our nuclear, and then the replacement of those 200 plus megawatts at the end of the 20-year period is something we've really got to start planning for.
One of the options is maybe we figure out how to extend that with the others at MEAG, but those places are also seeing the increase in electrification and the use of the need for energy. And so we have to kind of work down both paths. It is why I think it's important that we are looking at, even with the natural gas unit, that we're looking at the environmental requirements that are associated with that to have the hydrogen or the sequestration or whatever the other options are. But we also, so remember Vogel's 2008 when we started that, and a series of reasons it took a long time. But it's a substantial amount of load at a very high load capacity factor. It is a really, it's going to be an important decision that we need to make between now and 2030. We're going to need to be able to make decisions about, does it extend? How could it? Or what do we do to replace that? Because what we're talking about is a substantial, it's a big chunk of our
another comment to make about the member cities of the MEAG, the communities that own it. They've got fractured positions where some of them only have 10 megawatts or 20 megawatts, and so to accumulate enough to replace the 200 would be a chore. So I'm just just need to keep mindful of that.
There's 28 or 29 cities that have what we have all of on the back end. So it is.
Most times they are in a common voice.
a lot, our participation work with MEAG has been of a common voice for the last couple of years. And we have a good relationship with them, and we'll continue to have that and have longer term discussions. We have held off on having longer term discussions until we actually get it up and running. But I don't want us to lose track of the 2050 goals, and the timeline on making these decisions really are sooner than we might normally think, because it takes so long and it's so important. And it becomes generational activities. I mean, we're going to be paying for it's going to be clean energy, but we're paying for decisions that were made 15, 20 years ago. And so will the next generation of people that are sitting in this seat 20 years from now. So that's why it's important that we balance these, listen to the community, look at the cost, look at the environmental sustainability, affordability, and all of that.
I want to make two key takeaways in this discussion that are important to kind of bring forward is your question about, are we future-proofing this plan? And that's why we're having this conversation with our consultants. What is happening in the industry? What's happening in other states in regards to conversions and what the regulations, where they're at, where they stand, where they could go. And the second piece is we're going to do another IRP, and by then we'll have more certainty, right? And that's coming up. Those are two key drivers that we're going to continue working on. This is not a one and done, but I think it's important that it's recognized that we are actually considering the aspect, what happened after 2030 if I build a plan that cannot be expanded? Or can I expand it more? Can I partner with someone else in other areas to actually bring the most value? We continue having those discussions. We're not said and done, but I wanted to share those 2 points that are important, that we are actually looking at the future and where the regulations discussions are taking place. Definitely our next RFP is going to help us to solidify even more so what happened after 2030.
And again, thank you for listening. I think the last time we talked about the time frame, it was going to be 3 to 5 years, and your committee general said, no, we need it to be in 3. So I know it's a lot of work, but hopefully we can get our same shareholders back, stakeholders, people from the community, because we've educated them through this process. But 3 years is important, not 5.
Oh, definitely.
So thank you for listening.
No, definitely. Yeah, we appreciate that. I'd like to review the potential next energy mix and diversification, because a lot of questions about fuel types are really not going to spend a lot of time. We're just going to touch on a few things and I'll open up for questions. So as we implement this, we're going to increase the diversity. As we have more diversity, we'll have more options. Our customers are going to benefit from stability on fuel. This graphical depiction of the addition of clean energy shows on the green and on the light green on the top represents a potential mix in the different fuel types. A higher efficiency gas plant provides flexibility to reliably serve 5% more energy demand than what we had last year, using less gas to produce more energy. That's basically what that means when we talk about higher efficiency. It means that you're going to use less fuel to produce more energy, hence everyone benefits from it. I want to touch on a couple items that were discussed today in regards to solar. Solar is available when there is sun. Then what happens when there's not sun? And what happens when we have a storm that is coming through, we have a hurricane coming through and it's cloudy and we're not producing energy? I think it's important that I touch on those 2 items so you kind of reflect a little bit on we really believe the solar is part of our portfolio. It should be part of our portfolio, but we also believe that we have to provide 24/7 energy to all our customers. That's something I wanted to kind of touch a little bit on.
I think that's important. We talked a little bit about the timing of solar, and we talked about the timing of the natural gas, but some of what is in this mix is our batteries, storage. Storage is expensive right now. It will become less expensive over time. But the storage that we're talking about at the scale that we're talking about is between a 1 hour or a 4 hour battery storage. That is kind of filling up full capacity and using it. That time you can stretch some of that out, but it is not something that gets you through several days. It's not something that gets you through the night, and we've got to be able to keep an eye on and watch changing industry. Laura mentioned that the people from EPRI are going to be here to talk about electric vehicles. EPRI is a research institute that we're also working with to help expand our ability to be able to look at all of the technology changes we have, including storage. And so the gas is here because our requirement to be able to serve our customers reliably, affordably, and sustainably.
But the other thing we got to be cognizant of the fact is 80% of the solar panels we get in this country are from China. I mean, there are some issues here that we just got to be smart and cognizant of when we're looking at making decisions that won't be accomplished in 3, 5, 10 years. So I think our goal is to be climate sensitive, but also we've got to make sure that what we do, we also providing for our customers on a daily basis. And I think it's a very heroic process that you guys have built, including our community. But I think we got to be realistic of how we're going to get there and really push to get to where we want. But there are challenges in anything we do.
Bobby, I don't think there's any question we're going to be realistic. What I am seeing thus far is not good communication. Everybody that spoke wanted to have more solar now. And this conversation where we talk about, well, 1 hour or 4 hours is the battery technology, the Chinese issue. The public needs to understand that, you know, we're not doing it because we've got a reason to like gas. It's because we've got a reason to like reliability, and technology just isn't there yet.
Yes,
that's a great point, John.
Absolutely. It's also, I think the communication, I appreciated what I heard from almost every public commenter. And if we were to sit down and talk about the nuance of what they said, they may not agree with all of this, but we are adding significant, with 2% renewables right now, and we're going to 35% clean energy. We are absolutely responding to the public. We're moving towards more environmentally sensitive solutions, including gas. And even though there was a call, I think, that we needed to not use the coal and petcoke that we have, the solid fuel that we use, but in 2030, we're estimating that to be 3%. That is not insignificant. That is, it is still there. It is still something that we can use, but it helps us balance exactly what you're talking about is, some of the programs that you all have seen, what it's calling for 30% renewables by 2030, and we're talking about 35% clean energy by 2030. I don't know that if we started a year ago and talked when did we start? 2021. Whenever we started this, I don't know that people would have heard that we were going to listen as well as I think we have. So I'm proud of the way the team has worked. I'm also proud of the comments that we got back from the public, and that we heard a balance of those things. So we are absolutely need to be able to do both. We're not picking gas blindly, and we're not thinking about without the idea of new technologies and hydrogen. So I think you're absolutely right. And part of the message becomes now, once we set these goals. So Laura's talked about this public event in May where we share the story with the public, and then we need to share the story. That's not the end of our sharing the story, because we got to keep on talking about it, keep on letting the public know, and let them know that we also are hearing the affordability kind of things. We're looking at how we manage our rates and how we manage our, both for commercial, industrial, and residential customers. That's exactly what
And the dangerous piece here that we can't forget about is the market purchases. You know, we are relying on outside sources for a big part in 22 of our capacity. And we are building out capacity to meet demand, but we are still relying on outside sources. And if, any of these costs really go up,
Cool.
and you saw,
feel it.
yeah,
Feel it.
we will suffer. So I think this is another thing we can't lose sight of is we are relying on outside sources for our capacity. This is not a very complicated thing we got to deal with. But,
I appreciate the comment.
no, but what you guys are doing, and we appreciate you bringing in community thoughts. And I think we've got to keep striving for the best result for taking care of climate, taking care of our customers. And I think as John made a good point, we got to continue communicating the challenges and be honest with people, our real challenges to get to where we need to get.
Yeah, I think one thing we haven't really hit on, I think the next slide might have this was the slide.
Yeah, and before we go, can you go back? Just I want to share a couple items that you were touched on. I do appreciate you recognizing that the market purchases will be reduced. I personally live in the world of these markets, and things are going to get more expensive. So these efforts are moving us in the right direction. In 2005, 71% of our energy was solid fuel created, which is shown on the brown color on the right side. When we are at the tail end of this journey in 2030, we're talking about 3% of it. But the use of those solid fuel resources will be a lot less. That's our expectation. But I want to also level set that we do have access to the market in case some of these things change, and we will continue benefiting to getting the best out of the market when you have diversification. That's basically what I want to share. When you have solid diversification, like it is shown in this graph on the right side, you're definitely in a better position to maintain the fuel cost is stable for our customers. Yes, we can go to the next slide if we can. I wanted to touch on that briefly. So what are we sharing here is we previously discussed cost to help put things into perspective. We look at a 30-year time frame, which is the IRP. So we estimated a net present value to implement the plan that has been discussed this morning. Simply put, continuing with the existing generation resources all the way to 2050 is estimated about $16.5 billion, all cost. To produce energy with the new additional resources estimated at 16.1, which include the capital cost of the new plant and also the Northside generation decommission. What is not included is what been discussed today, is the transmission cost. As discussed earlier, there are identified sites, and we need to perform a comprehensive transmission system analysis to do that. We actually we're onboarding a consultant in this process that is helping us navigate through this. And it's going to continue helping us in this journey, and we go from this year into future years. We believe that once all things are settled, the cost will be more closer as we integrate the PPAs. And as we negotiate these PPAs, we want to stay close to what the studies did. We also need to make decisions that are in line with what was actually evaluated, and that is going to be our compass as we go forward. Any questions in regards to this piece?
So the net present value is the cost to produce the energy, the fuel, the capital,
all of it. That's basically how we calculate.
It's amazingly close, isn't it?
It is, and for this magnitude, it's very close, almost equal, but yes, it's all capital and operating and fuel costs. And then, is it 30 years?
That's it's for a window all the way to 2051.
And this is for what we've talked about for between now and 2030. There will be other costs and things that we have to do to keep on meeting the others. And the transmission is something that's going to happen regardless of any of the solutions that we come up with. And even if we stay like we are, we're going to need more transmission.
These new resource plans balance the reliability, affordability, and sustainability to serve JEA customers. I'd like to review the capital plans. We have a few things I want to share. We touched on this a little bit. Here's about $1.1 billion that we have actually, I'll call it been able to identify. They're a part of our CIP plan already. And when this may occur, we have been asked a few times about this. I just wanted to share it with everyone to integrate the 4 sites that we've been discussing. The team have determined this, what we call planning level estimates and when they will happen. It includes the combined cycle plus the decommission of the Northside Generation Unit 3. This could change. We understand it could change, but at least we have it already implemented in our CIP, so it's
Baker,
transparent.
can't we, with owning the land, can't we contribute the land on the solar to, as a partner?
That's correct.
Let somebody else build this, so we're reducing our,
Yes, sir.
okay, so that is a thought process.
That is a thought process because I'll use 2 examples in our territory to illustrate it. We have the land that we owned, that we're going to negotiate a PPA for them using our land. There's a PPA in the north side in which the land is being leased. So the lease cost is going to be passed on to us, right? So we have an advantage of owning the land. So your observation is right, spot on.
And then on the combined cycle, if we could find a partner, we can contribute land and that also, couldn't we?
The same thought process applies.
Yeah.
I think that's important. We're not presenting the exact steps in the plan for the combined cycle. We need to look at all our options and be sure that we are looking how we partner, how we build, how we own, how we all the different pieces, and that will come in the next short term. We got to make decisions in the relatively short term, the next year, to be able to meet those standards as well. That some of the studies are underway now.
Any other comments, Tom, Marty, Rick, General?
So I think, Jay, you just answered what I was going to ask. So this current scenario here, the decision point for us to commit to would be 2024, if we're going to go down this path. Is that about right? To get all the wheels going and
to get, so what I think we have 2 different steps in the next month. If we would talk about firming up the actual goals.
Right.
And then this is just a regular routine process that on the capital. I don't know if Ted wants to talk about the routine capital process that business planning cycle, and we'd have to make that call. So especially on a project that's going to take 5 years to build, if we back off of that, we've got to make the decision to go 2024, 2025, right? And a lot of that is the work we do on an annual cycle basis, right?
Right, and also as we look at how we fund it, right? And so we will have to work to make sure we have the resources available to fund that through capital investments. So.
Anything else, Pedro?
I don't have anything else. I have, if you don't mind to go to the last 2 slides, just take a last look at the next. This is where we started the journey and wanted to kind of put it back in here. We are committed for these potential goals and appreciate the questions and anything we could do to keep transparency at the forefront.
Thank you, guys. Laura, you have.
Keying off Pedro's transparency choice of words, at the April 18th External Affairs Committee, Pedro and I will co-present, and he'll talk about numbers and I'll talk about nouns, verbs, and images and give some insight and get your feedback on how we shape the discussion and tell the story at that May 25th public event. Because we do want to make this very digestible for the public. And we do want to have that 8th and final stakeholder meeting continue a robust and balanced discussion of what this means and what we're going to do next to make it so. So we look forward to that discussion.
Thank you so much, Laura. Is there any other comments moving forward, old and other new business? My only report is I want to thank Michael for partnering with us and the city council partnering with us on legislative Tallahassee issues and others, and I appreciate your interest with us and everything you're doing on the city council to help us and our community. Ted, if we need to move forward with any new thoughts on our cash and how we're managing our cash, I think everybody on this board is willing to move quickly with you. And with that, our next boarding meeting is April 25th, and appreciate everybody's comments, both from the community and from the board. Everybody have a great day. Meeting adjourned.